Who exactly is the Archangel Uriel, and what makes his astonishing story so unknown to most people? This evening, you are going to uncover the full chronicle of God's flame, the mighty archangel whose burning blade stands guard at Eden's entrance, whose sacred radiance cuts through creation's most profound enigmas. Beginning with his position in scriptural prophecies and extending through his presence across holy writings, the tale of Uriel has stayed concealed in open view, awaiting those souls who search for spiritual reality and tranquil slumber. While you prepare for rest tonight, allow the soothing narrative of Uriel's heavenly purpose to flow through you, his warnings delivered to Noah ahead of the deluge, his counsel offered to the prophets, and his endless watch as the fiery protector of paradise. Before we continue, though, for those just joining this channel, think about pressing that like button and subscribing if you have not done so yet. Your engagement allows us to keep producing more content designed to help you relax. Additionally, share with us your location and current time. We are creating a worldwide community right here. So now, shall we begin easing into the story of today? Within the silent recesses of age-old manuscripts, where darkness plays among forgotten language, rests the account of an angel whose identity echoes across time like wind moving through leaves in fall. Uriel, God's living flame, the radiance of what is holy. Still, unlike his well-known siblings, Michael and Gabriel, Uriel stays cloaked in enigma, his narrative spread across writings that countless people have never encountered. Imagine an angel positioned at the boundary of comprehension, grasping a flame that glows with wisdom's very essence. This describes Uriel, whose mere existence conveys mysteries too deep for common minds to hold. While Michael brandishes his blade and Gabriel sounds his horn, Uriel carries something much more understated yet endlessly more potent, the flame of heavenly knowledge that brightens the most shadowed recesses of being. The very name reveals all things and reveals nothing at once. Uriel translates to, "God is my light," or alternatively, "fire of God," depending on your interpretation of the ancient Hebrew sounds. These two meanings intertwine in flawless unity, because what is heavenly fire, if not the most refined expression of light? What is wisdom except illumination consuming the shadows cast by ignorance? Within the grand design of angelic entities, Uriel holds a distinctive position. He serves as the angel of the western direction, the keeper of the autumn season, the guardian of sacred fire that cleanses without annihilating. Age-old manuscripts portray him as the angel standing in the presence of God's throne, his countenance ablaze with reflected divine splendor, his wings extended broadly to protect mortal vision from revelations too luminous to withstand. So why, you may ask, does his account remain so veiled? Why do we speak comfortably of Michael's conflicts and Gabriel's proclamations, yet hesitate when attempting to share Uriel's understated service? The explanation resides in wisdom's essential character. Wisdom does not cry out from mountain peaks or declare itself with blaring instruments. It murmurs, it lingers. It unveils itself exclusively to individuals prepared to accept its tender flame. The chronicle of Uriel proved too expansive, too intricate for the straightforward narratives that made their way into mainstream religious scripture. His function as the angel of repentance, the keeper of heavenly enigmas, the one who interprets divine intention. These duties demanded a depth of comprehension that early religious authorities found challenging to fit within orderly doctrinal frameworks. Therefore, his stories were safeguarded elsewhere, in manuscripts that academics label apocryphal, in customs that flow like hidden streams under the surface of institutional religion. But do not be mistaken. Although his account may be less recognized, the influence of Uriel has molded human comprehension of the sacred for thousands upon thousands of years. He emerges in the dreams of those with mystical awareness, in the revelations of prophetic voices, in the silent instances when truth-seekers find themselves abruptly enlightened by understanding they struggle to articulate. He stands as the angel at the doorway, separating the known from the unknowable, extending his hand to lead those courageous enough to step into divine wisdom's radiance. Throughout Jewish custom, Uriel ranks among the four mighty archangels positioned at the four corners surrounding God's seat. In Christian mystical thought, He appears as the angel of the ultimate judgment, the being who shall blow the trumpet when days conclude. In Islamic tradition, although his identity may shift, his core remains unchanged. The angel of sacred fire who purifies and enlightens. Ancient manuscripts inform us that Uriel stood present at humanity's most critical moments throughout history. Though frequently operating behind the visible realm, his impact experienced rather than observed. After Adam and Eve faced expulsion from Eden, Uriel received his station at the entrance, serving not as a severe guardian, but as a symbol of what had been forfeited and what could still be recovered through wisdom and turning back to God. When the immense flood arrived, Uriel numbered among the angels, assisting in guiding the heavenly design, making certain that righteousness would outlast the waters of divine reckoning. Yet perhaps most critically, Uriel represents the angel of individual revelation. While Michael wages our battles and Gabriel delivers our communications, Uriel kindles the light of comprehension inside our very hearts. He is the angel who assists us in seeing with clarity, who incinerates the deceptions preventing us from truth, who leads us tenderly toward divine wisdom's brightness. His emblem is fire, though not the devastating flames of worldly conflagration. The fire of Uriel is the hallowed flame burning in the soul's inner sanctuary, the radiance that brightens without devouring, the heat that brings comfort without overpowering. It manifests as the fire of the flaming bush that addressed Moses, the flame that hovered over the apostles' heads during Pentecost, the soft glow surrounding individuals who have touched the edge of divine comprehension. This evening, as we embark on this exploration through the story of Uriel, we invite you to picture that hallowed fire glowing softly within your own heart. Allow its tender radiance to lead you through the passages of ancient wisdom, beyond the neglected corners where angels reside, into the peaceful spaces where heavenly mysteries open like blossoms in God's eternal garden of love. Ultimately, the story of Uriel is the story of wisdom in its truest form, patient, enduring, perpetually accessible to individuals who pursue it with modest hearts. It tells of divine radiance that never fades, sacred fire that never expires, heavenly love that never ceases to light the pathway toward home. Angels within the ancient world. Long before Scripture's pages received their writing, before temples stretched upward to meet the sky, before prayers first got whispered into darkness, human hearts already perceived the existence of something beyond the curtain of normal sight. In civilization's birthplace, where the earliest cities developed beside mighty rivers, people gazed upward at the heavens and understood they were not solitary. The ancient world vibrated with messengers from the realm of the divine. People addressed them by varying names in different tongues, yet the core remained consistent. Beings composed of light and strength, who traveled between heaven and earth, carrying divine will to mortal hearts. These were the predecessors of our angels, the initial whispers of what would eventually become the magnificent chorus of celestial entities. In the rich valleys of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates waterways colored the terrain green, the Sumerians discussed divine messengers they named Sukal. These beings served the deities with absolute faithfulness, transporting their commands across the enormous distance separating the heavenly and earthly domains. Clay tablets dating back 4,000 years speak of winged figures standing sentry at temple gates, their eyes glowing with sacred fire, their presence simultaneously reassuring and fearsome. The Babylonians and Assyrians inherited these customs, weaving them into complex tapestries depicting divine hierarchy. Their artwork reveals to us winged beings possessing human faces and eagle wings, creatures of tremendous power who functioned as intermediaries connecting the gods and humanity. In their epic poetry, we discover divine messengers appearing before heroes at pivotal moments, providing guidance, warnings, or blessings as the gods determined. But it was not solely in Mesopotamia that humans sensed these divine messengers' presence. In the shadow cast by the magnificent pyramids, Egyptian priests discussed beings they identified as Netru, divine principles assuming angelic form to interact with the mortal realm. The walls of ancient burial chambers show us figures with wings crafted from gold and lapis lazuli, beings who guided souls through the passage of death and rebirth. Egyptian mythology speaks of messenger gods carrying the words of Ra across the heavens, who whispered wisdom to pharaohs within their dreams, who stood sentry at the boundaries separating life from death. These divine messengers were not distinct from the gods, but emanations of divine will. Expressions of divine love made visible in forms that human hearts could comprehend. The impact of these ancient customs cannot be exaggerated. When Hebrew tribes wandered through the wilderness, when they settled in the land promised to them, when they began developing their own comprehension of the divine, they carried with them the gathered wisdom of millennia. The angels of Hebrew scripture did not emerge from nothingness, but from the fertile soil of ancient human experience with the divine. Yet, the Hebrew comprehension of angels was distinctive. Where other cultures viewed divine messengers as extensions of various deities, the Hebrews understood them as servants of a single supreme God, unified in purpose and intention. This transformation in understanding would prove revolutionary, establishing the foundation for all subsequent angelology in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The word malach in Hebrew translates simply as messenger, yet it carries depths of significance that simple translation fails to capture. These divine messengers were not simply celestial postal carriers, but living embodiments of God's presence in the world. When they manifested to humans, they brought not merely communications, but the very breath of the divine, the warmth of divine love, the light of divine truth. Ancient manuscripts inform us that these messengers manifested at pivotal moments throughout human history. They stood with Abraham beneath the oaks of Mamre, wrestled with Jacob along the river Jabbok, called to Moses from the flaming bush, proclaimed births to women who were barren, guided the Israelites through the wilderness with pillars formed of cloud and fire. Every manifestation served as a reminder that heaven was never distant from earth, that divine love was perpetually reaching toward human hearts. Yet even in these early Hebrew manuscripts, we can observe the seeds of what would later develop into the detailed angelology of the Second Temple era. Certain angels begin receiving distinction from others. Some seem to possess particular roles and duties. Some appear to have names and individual traits that distinguish them from the general chorus of divine messengers. The prophet Ezekiel provides us perhaps the most striking picture of these celestial beings in his renowned vision of the divine chariot. He portrays creatures with 4 faces and 4 wings, beings whose very appearance conveys power and glory beyond human comprehension. These are not gentle messengers, but awe-inspiring servants of an awe-inspiring God, beings whose presence causes the very foundations of the earth to tremble. Daniel also discusses angelic beings with individual characteristics. He tells of one resembling a son of man who appears in divine visions, of messengers who interpret the meaning of prophetic dreams, of spiritual princes who conduct war in heavenly realms. In his writings, we observe the beginning of the understanding that would later position angels like Uriel in specific roles within the cosmic order. The wisdom literature of ancient Israel also discusses divine messengers, though often in more nuanced terms. The Psalms are filled with references to angels who serve as God's messengers, who protect the righteous, who execute divine will in the world. These texts present angels not as remote beings, but as intimate participants in human life, as present as breath, as close as prayer. Greek influence, which swept through the ancient world following the conquests of Alexander, brought new ways of thinking about divine beings. The Greeks had their own traditions of divine messengers. Hermes transporting messages between gods and mortals, guardian spirits watching over individuals, divine principles taking personal form. When Greek thought encountered Hebrew tradition, it created fertile ground for new understandings of angelic beings. This was the world into which more complex angelology would soon emerge, a world where divine messengers had been known and honored for thousands of years, a world where the boundary between heaven and earth was understood to be permeable, where divine beings moved with purpose and grace, a world ready to receive new revelations about the nature and roles of angels like Uriel, whose stories would soon begin to unfold in the sacred texts of the Second Temple era. The stage was set. The ancient world had prepared human hearts to receive the fuller revelation of angelic reality that was approaching, the birth of angelology. In the centuries that followed the Babylonian exile, something remarkable occurred in Jewish religious thought. Like a garden awakening after the sleep of winter, the understanding of angels began to flourish with unprecedented richness and detail. What had once been simple acknowledgement of divine messengers developed into elaborate systems of heavenly hierarchy, complete with names, ranks, and specific divine responsibilities. This flourishing of angelology did not occur overnight. It grew slowly, carefully, nurtured by the unique circumstances of Jewish life in the Second Temple period. The trauma of exile had shattered many assumptions about how God worked in the world. If God was all-powerful and loving, why had the temple been destroyed? Why had the chosen people been scattered? These questions demanded new ways of understanding divine providence and the complex relationships between heaven and earth. The answers arrived gradually, woven into new texts that would never find their way into the official biblical canon, but would profoundly influence Jewish and Christian thought for centuries to come. These were the apocryphal and pseudepigraphic writings, books attributed to ancient figures like Enoch, Ezra, and Baruch, but actually composed during this period of theological creativity and exploration. In these texts, angels began to acquire individual personalities. They received names that reflected their specific roles in the divine economy. They were organized into hierarchies that mirrored earthly kingdoms, but operated according to heavenly principles. Most importantly, they became intermediaries who could explain the apparent distance between an all-good God and a world filled with suffering and evil. The most significant of these texts for understanding the emergence of Uriel was the Book of Enoch, specifically the section known as First Enoch. This remarkable work, composed over several centuries, presents the most detailed picture of angelic hierarchy and function found anywhere in ancient literature. It is here that Uriel first steps fully into the light of recorded history, not as a vague divine messenger, but as a specific angelic being with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. But to understand the emergence of Uriel, we must first understand the theological revolution that was taking place. Jewish thinkers were grappling with what scholars call the problem of transcendence. If God was truly infinite and perfect, how could such a being interact directly with finite, imperfect humans? The answer they developed was elegant and profound. God worked through intermediaries, through angelic beings who could bridge the gap between the infinite and the finite. This concept was not entirely new. Other ancient cultures had similar ideas about divine hierarchy, but the Jewish development was unique in its monotheistic framework. These angelic intermediaries were not lesser gods but created beings, servants of the one true God, each reflecting different aspects of divine nature and will. The number 7 became particularly significant in this angelology. 7 archangels, 7 heavens, 7 divine attributes, manifested through angelic ministry. This was not arbitrary numerology, but reflected deep theological convictions about the perfection and completeness of divine order. 7 represented wholeness, fullness, the complete manifestation of divine will in creation. It is within this framework of 7 great archangels that Uriel found his place. Different texts give slightly different lists of these 7, but Uriel appears consistently as one of the primary angelic princes who stand before God's throne. His specific role as the angel of divine fire and wisdom made him particularly important in a theological system that emphasized the purifying and illuminating aspects of divine presence. The Book of Enoch presents Uriel as one of the 4 great archangels who stand at the 4 corners of God's throne, each responsible for one of the cardinal directions and the spiritual forces associated with it. Uriel is the angel of the West, the direction associated with the setting sun, with endings and beginnings, with the mysteries of death and rebirth. This positioning reflects his role as the angel of final things, the one who reveals divine secrets and guides souls through the transformative fire of divine judgment. But the emergence of Uriel in Second Temple angelology was not merely a matter of theological categorization. He fulfilled specific religious and psychological needs for Jewish communities, struggling to maintain their identity in a complex and often hostile world. As the angel of divine fire, he represented the possibility of purification and renewal. As the angel of wisdom, he offered hope that divine truth could still be accessed even when traditional sources of authority seemed compromised or absent. The development of written angelology also reflected changing ideas about prophecy and divine revelation. The great prophetic voices of the exile period, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, 2nd Isaiah, had proclaimed God's word with authority and power. But in the post-exilic period, that kind of direct prophetic revelation seemed to have ended. Angels filled this gap, serving as continuing sources of divine guidance and revelation for communities that still needed to hear God's voice. The role of Uriel as an interpreter of divine mysteries made him particularly important in this context. He was not just a messenger, but a teacher, one who could explain the deeper meanings behind divine actions and reveal the hidden patterns of divine providence. This made him especially beloved by Jewish mystics and scholars who sought to understand the complexities of divine justice and mercy. The Greek influence that permeated the Hellenistic world also shaped this emerging angelology. Greek philosophical concepts about the organization of the cosmos, about the relationship between the material and spiritual, about the nature of divine intermediaries, all found their way into Jewish angelic speculation. But these foreign influences were transformed by Jewish monotheism into something uniquely Hebrew. The result was a rich and complex angelology that would profoundly influence not only Judaism, but also Christianity and Islam. Angels became not just occasional divine messengers, but permanent participants in the cosmic order, each with specific roles and responsibilities, each reflecting particular aspects of divine nature and will. The place of Uriel in this developing system was secure and significant. As the angel of divine fire, he represented the purifying and transformative power of divine love. As the angel of wisdom, he embodied the illuminating and revelatory aspects of divine truth. As one of the great archangels, he stood as a bridge between the infinite God and finite creation, making divine presence accessible to human hearts and minds. This was the birth of angelology as a systematic theological discipline. From this foundation would grow centuries of further development, speculation, and reverence. But the essential patterns were established here in the creative theological ferment of the Second Temple period, when Jewish thinkers dared to imagine the invisible hierarchies of heaven and found among them the blazing figure of Uriel, the fire of God. The Book of Enoch and Uriel's first appearance. In the midst of ancient literature, few texts have captured the imagination quite like the Book of Enoch. This remarkable work, attributed to the mysterious figure who walked with God and was taken up without tasting death, opens doorways into realms of divine mystery that few other texts dare to explore. And it is here, in these pages that shimmer with otherworldly light, that we encounter Uriel for the first time as a fully realized angelic being. The Book of Enoch is not one book, but several, woven together over centuries by anonymous scribes who felt called to preserve and expand upon the ancient traditions of Enoch's heavenly journey. The oldest sections may date back to the 3rd century before the Common Era, making them among the earliest detailed accounts of angelic hierarchy and heavenly geography that have survived to our time. Picture, if you will, a man standing at the edge of the known world, gazing up at stars that seem to whisper secrets in languages older than human speech. This is Enoch, the 7th from Adam, chosen by divine grace to witness things that no other mortal has seen. The text tells us that he was a righteous man who pleased God, and because of his righteousness, he was granted visions that would illuminate the hidden workings of the cosmos. The journey begins simply enough. Enoch is taken up from the earth, lifted by divine power beyond the boundaries of ordinary human experience. But as he ascends, the simple becomes profound. The familiar becomes mystical, and the visible world gives way to realms of pure spiritual reality. It is during this cosmic journey that Enoch first encounters Uriel, though the meeting is so seamlessly woven into the narrative that we might almost miss its significance. Uriel appears not with fanfare or dramatic announcement, but with the quiet authority of one who has always belonged in this realm of divine mystery. He is introduced as Uriel, one of the holy angels who takes charge of the thunder and the terror, a description that immediately signals his role as a being of both power and responsibility. But the thunder of Uriel is not the chaotic crash of earthly storms. It is the ordered voice of divine authority. Terror, the sound that creation itself makes when it speaks the will of its creator. His terror is not the fear that destroys, but the awe that transforms, the sacred trembling that comes upon those who suddenly realize they are standing in the presence of the divine. As the guide and interpreter for Enoch, Uriel takes on the role that will define him throughout the literature of divine revelation. He is the angel who explains, who illuminates, who makes the incomprehensible accessible to human understanding. When Enoch sees visions that overwhelm his mortal mind, it is Uriel who provides the key to their meaning. The text describes Uriel showing Enoch the luminaries of heaven, the sun, moon, and stars in their courses. But this is not mere astronomy. Uriel reveals the spiritual principles that govern celestial motion, the divine laws that keep the cosmos in perfect harmony. He explains how the movements of heavenly bodies reflect the unchanging nature of divine order, how the dance of planets and stars is actually a prayer of praise offered by creation to its creator. Through the teaching of Uriel, Enoch learns that time itself is a divine gift, carefully measured and purposefully ordered. The angel shows him the gates through which the sun passes in its daily journey, the chambers where the winds are stored, the reservoirs from which rain and snow are released upon the earth. Everything in creation, Uriel explains, follows divine patterns established before the foundation of the world. But perhaps most significantly, Uriel serves as the guide for Enoch through the mysteries of divine justice. When Enoch sees visions of judgment and punishment, when he witnesses the fate of the wicked and the reward of the righteous, it is Uriel who explains the deeper principles at work. The angel reveals that divine justice is not arbitrary punishment, but the natural consequence of moral choices, the way the universe itself responds to righteousness and wickedness. In one of the most haunting passages, Uriel shows Enoch the place where the fallen angels are imprisoned, the rebellious watchers who corrupted both themselves and humanity through their disobedience. The description is filled with imagery of fire and darkness, of binding and torment. But the explanation of Uriel reveals that even this punishment serves a redemptive purpose within the larger divine plan. The role of the angel as interpreter becomes particularly important when Enoch encounters visions of the end times. Uriel explains the signs that will precede the final judgment, the cosmic upheavals that will mark the transition from the current age to the age of divine righteousness. But he does so with a calm authority that transforms terrifying visions into revelations of hope. Throughout these encounters, Uriel emerges as more than just a messenger or guide. He becomes a teacher in the deepest sense, one who not only provides information but transforms understanding. His instruction changes Enoch from a righteous man into a visionary prophet, from someone who walked with God into someone who could speak authoritatively about divine mysteries. The relationship between Uriel and Enoch in this text establishes patterns that will be repeated throughout the literature of divine revelation. The angel appears not to overwhelm or intimidate, but to illuminate and instruct. His power is channeled through wisdom, his authority expressed through patient teaching. He represents the divine desire to be known and understood, not as an object of fear, but as the source of all truth and wisdom. Perhaps most importantly, the first appearance of Uriel in the Book of Enoch establishes his credentials as the angel of divine secrets. He is the one who reveals hidden things, who explains mysteries, who bridges the gap between divine knowledge and human understanding. This role will follow him throughout the centuries, making him beloved by mystics and scholars who seek to penetrate the deeper meanings of existence. The Book of Enoch presents Uriel as completely at home in the heavenly realm, moving with the easy familiarity of one who has always belonged there. Yet, he is also perfectly capable of communicating with human consciousness, translating divine realities into forms that mortal minds can grasp. This dual nature, fully angelic yet accessible to humanity, makes him the perfect guide for those who would explore the boundaries between heaven and earth. In these ancient pages, Uriel steps forward as the angel of enlightenment, the divine flame that illuminates without consuming, the teacher who reveals truth with patience and grace. His first appearance sets the stage for all his subsequent roles in the literature of divine revelation, establishing him as one of the most important and beloved figures in the angelic hierarchy, Uriel and the Watchers. In the shadowed corridors of ancient memory, few stories carry the weight of cosmic tragedy quite like the tale of the Watchers. These were angels of the highest order, beings of pure light and purpose, who were given the sacred responsibility of watching over humanity in its early days. Yet their story became one of the great cautionary tales of spiritual literature, a reminder that even beings of divine origin could fall from grace through the corruption of free will. And standing at the heart of this cosmic drama, wielding the terrible fire of divine justice, we find Uriel in one of his most solemn and powerful roles. The Book of Enoch tells us that in the days when humanity was young, and the boundary between heaven and earth was thinner than gossamer, 200 angels were chosen to serve as watchers over the children of men. These were not ordinary angels, but beings of extraordinary wisdom and power, entrusted with guiding human development according to divine will. Their leader was Semjaza, an angel whose name meant rebellious against God, though at the time of his appointment, such rebellion was unthinkable. Under his authority served other great angels: Azazel, who would teach humanity the arts of war; Armoros, who would reveal the secrets of enchantment; Barakijal, who would instruct in astrology; and many others, each carrying knowledge that was meant to remain hidden until humanity was ready to receive it. For a time, these watchers fulfilled their divine mandate with perfect obedience. They observed human life with detached compassion, intervening only when divine providence required their assistance. They were the invisible guardians of the early world, the silent protectors who ensured that humanity would develop according to divine design. But gradually, something began to change in the hearts of these celestial beings. As they watched humanity more closely, as they observed the beauty and passion of human life, they began to experience something that angels were never meant to feel: desire, not the pure love that angels naturally bear toward all creation, but the possessive, consuming want that belongs to fallen nature. The daughters of men were fair in their eyes, and the watchers began to lust after them with a hunger that grew stronger with each passing day. This desire was not merely physical, but spiritual, a longing to abandon their heavenly nature and descend into the complexity and limitation of earthly existence. Semjaza, their leader, proposed a pact that would forever change the course of both angelic and human history. If they were going to rebel against their divine mandate, he reasoned, they should do so together, binding themselves with oaths that none could break. 200 angels swore upon Mount Hermon to descend to earth, to take human wives, and to abandon their watching posts in the heavenly realm. The consequences of this decision rippled through creation like cracks in a perfect mirror. The watchers descended and took wives from among the daughters of men, and their union produced offspring that were neither fully human nor fully angelic. These were the Nephilim, the giants of ancient lore, beings of immense size and power who possessed the spiritual knowledge of angels but the fallen nature of rebellious spirits. But the corruption did not stop there. The fallen watchers began to teach humanity secrets that were meant to remain hidden. Azazel taught the making of weapons and the arts of war, introducing violence and conflict to a world that had known only peace. Others taught the use of cosmetics and jewelry, awakening vanity and pride. Still others revealed the secrets of astrology and divination, leading humanity into forbidden knowledge of future events. The result was chaos. The earth became filled with violence as the Nephilim tyrannized over ordinary humans. Knowledge that should have been revealed gradually over centuries was dumped upon humanity all at once, creating confusion and corruption. The very foundations of divine order seemed to be crumbling under the weight of angelic rebellion. It was then that the four great archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, brought the crisis before the throne of the Most High. They had watched the unfolding disaster with growing alarm, seeing how the rebellion of the Watchers was corrupting both the heavenly and earthly realms. Their petition to God was both a cry for justice and a plea for the restoration of divine order. The response from the divine throne was swift and decisive. The Most High decreed that the rebellion must be stopped, the corruption cleansed, and divine order restored. But this was no simple matter of divine decree. The situation required careful, precise action that would bring justice without destroying the possibility of redemption. To each of the four great archangels was given a specific role in the divine response. Gabriel was sent to warn Noah of the coming flood that would cleanse the earth of corruption. Raphael was charged with binding Azazel and casting him into the darkness. Michael was commanded to bind Semjaza and the other leaders of the rebellion. And to Uriel fell perhaps the most terrible responsibility of all. He was to serve as the herald of divine judgment, the one who would announce the coming destruction and explain its necessity. But more than that, he was to be the executor of divine justice, the angel who would carry out the sentence of condemnation upon the fallen watchers. The text describes the mission of Uriel with vivid intensity. He appears to Enoch in a vision, his face blazing with divine fire, his presence both terrible and beautiful. In his hand, he carries the flame of divine justice, not the chaotic fire of earthly destruction, but the purifying flame that burns away corruption while preserving what is pure and good. The message of Uriel to Enoch is both warning and explanation. He reveals the full extent of the Watchers' corruption, showing how their rebellion has introduced violence, deception, and spiritual confusion into the world. But he also explains that divine justice will restore the balance, that the coming judgment will cleanse the earth and prepare it for a new beginning. The role of the angel in executing judgment upon the Watchers demonstrates his unique position in the angelic hierarchy. Unlike Michael, who binds through power, or Gabriel, who warns through prophecy, Uriel purifies through fire. His flame burns away the corruption that has infected both the rebellious angels and their human victims, separating the pure from the impure with divine precision. But even in judgment, the fire of Uriel carries the possibility of redemption. The text suggests that his burning is not merely punitive, but transformative, offering the possibility of purification even to those who have fallen furthest from grace. His fire is the fire of divine love, terrible in its purity, but ultimately aimed at restoration rather than destruction. The story of Uriel and the Watchers establishes several themes that will echo throughout his appearances in sacred literature. He emerges as the angel of divine justice, the one who ensures that cosmic order is maintained even when chaos threatens to overwhelm creation. His fire becomes the symbol of divine judgment that is both terrible and merciful, destructive and redemptive. Most importantly, this story establishes Uriel as the angel who stands at the boundary between divine mercy and divine justice, ensuring that both are perfectly balanced in the execution of divine will. He is the flame that burns away corruption while preserving what is pure, the light that illuminates truth while consuming falsehood. In the quiet spaces between judgment and mercy, Uriel stands as the eternal reminder that divine love itself sometimes requires the purifying fire of justice to restore what has been corrupted and heal what has been broken. Guardian of the Gates. In the great mythologies of the world, certain images appear again and again, woven into the collective memory of humanity like threads in an ancient tapestry. Among the most powerful of these is the figure of the guardian at the gate, the divine sentinel who stands between one realm and another, protecting sacred spaces from those who would enter unprepared or uninvited. In the traditions surrounding Uriel, this role of guardian takes on profound significance. He is not merely a doorkeeper, but a protector of thresholds, a guide for those who would pass from one state of being to another. His guardianship encompasses both the gates of paradise and the gates of the underworld, making him a figure of unique authority in the geography of the soul. The most famous of the guardianships of Uriel is his role as the angel stationed at the gates of Eden after the expulsion of Adam and Eve. This image has captured human imagination for millennia. The angel with the flaming sword standing eternal watch over the entrance to paradise, ensuring that fallen humanity cannot return to the garden until the conditions of divine justice have been satisfied. But the traditional image of Uriel as a harsh guardian wielding a sword of fire misses the deeper spiritual truth of his role. Ancient texts suggest that his presence at Eden's gate is not primarily punitive, but protective. He stands there, not to keep humanity out forever, but to ensure that no one enters the realm of divine perfection while still carrying the corruption of fallen nature. The flaming sword in the hand of Uriel is described in the earliest texts as turning in all directions, suggesting not static opposition, but dynamic discernment. This is the fire of divine wisdom that sees all things clearly, that can distinguish between the pure and the impure, the ready and the unready. It is a sword that wounds only to heal, that cuts away only what prevents the healing of the soul. Consider the deeper symbolism at work in this guardianship. Eden represents not just a physical location, but a state of spiritual consciousness, the condition of perfect harmony between the human soul and divine will. The guardianship of Uriel at its gates means that he oversees the process by which souls are prepared for that return to divine union. His fire becomes the agent of purification that makes such return possible. Those who would re-enter Eden must pass through the flame of divine testing, must allow the fire of divine love to burn away everything that is not compatible with the perfection of paradise. The role of Uriel is to ensure that this purification is complete, that no trace of corruption enters the sacred space. But the guardianship of Uriel extends beyond the gates of Eden to encompass other crucial thresholds in the spiritual journey. Ancient Jewish traditions speak of him as the guardian of the gates of the underworld, the angel who oversees the passage of souls from earthly life to whatever lies beyond. This role places him at the very heart of humanity's deepest mysteries, the nature of death and what follows it. In this capacity, Uriel serves not as a grim reaper, but as a compassionate guide who helps souls navigate the transition from one form of existence to another. His fire illuminates the path through the darkness of death, revealing the spiritual realities that physical eyes cannot see. He stands at the threshold between life and death, ensuring that each soul passes through according to divine will and divine mercy. The underground traditions of Jewish mysticism tell stories of the encounters of Uriel with souls at the moment of death. These tales describe him as a being of tremendous compassion whose fire burns away the illusions and attachments that might otherwise trap souls in confusion or despair. His presence at the threshold of death transforms what could be a terrifying transition into an opportunity for spiritual liberation. Some texts describe Uriel as the angel who shows souls the true nature of their earthly lives, revealing both the good and evil they have done with perfect clarity. But this revelation is not meant to torment, but to instruct, not to condemn, but to prepare the soul for whatever comes next. His fire burns away self-deception and false justification, leaving only the truth of what each soul has become through its choices. The tradition of Uriel as guardian of gates also extends to his role in protecting sacred spaces and times. He is said to stand watch over temples and sanctuaries, ensuring that only those who approach with proper reverence and preparation can enter into the presence of the divine. His guardianship creates a sacred boundary that preserves the holiness of these spaces. In the liturgical traditions of various religious communities, the guardianship of Uriel is invoked at moments of particular solemnity and significance. His presence is requested when communities gather for the most sacred rituals. When the boundary between the ordinary and the holy becomes especially thin, the mystical understanding of the guardianship of Uriel reveals that every threshold in spiritual life is under his protection. The moment when a seeker first turns toward the divine, the instant when prayer becomes true communion, the transition from intellectual understanding to heart knowledge, all of these passages fall under his watchful care. His guardianship is not static but dynamic, adapting to the needs of each soul and each situation. For some, his fire appears as gentle warmth that slowly burns away resistance to divine love. For others, it manifests as brilliant illumination that suddenly reveals truth that had long been hidden. For still others, it comes as purifying flame that cleanses the soul of everything that prevents full surrender to divine will. The tradition of Uriel as guardian also encompasses his role in protecting divine secrets from those who are not ready to receive them. Just as he guards the gates of Eden and the underworld, he also guards the gates of wisdom, ensuring that spiritual knowledge is revealed only to those who have prepared themselves through proper discipline and devotion. This aspect of his guardianship explains why Uriel appears so often in mystical literature as the angel who tests seekers before revealing deeper truths. His fire serves as both protection and preparation, burning away the pride and presumption that would make spiritual knowledge dangerous rather than beneficial. The image of Uriel as guardian reminds us that spiritual progress requires both protection and purification. The gates he guards are not arbitrary barriers, but necessary thresholds that ensure the readiness of the soul for each new level of divine encounter. His presence at these gates is a sign of divine mercy, ensuring that no soul is exposed to more truth than it can safely bear. In the quiet hours when seekers feel themselves standing at the threshold of new understanding, when the familiar gives way to the unknown, when the soul trembles on the edge of transformation, there stands Uriel with his flaming sword turned to discern the readiness of each heart. His guardianship ensures that every passage through the gates of spiritual experience becomes an opportunity for deeper purification and greater illumination. The gates he guards are ultimately gates of love, thresholds that protect not by excluding but by preparing, not by forbidding but by ensuring readiness. In his role as guardian, Uriel embodies the divine wisdom that knows exactly when each soul is ready for the next step in its journey home to the heart of divine love. The angel of fire. Fire speaks a language older than words, older than thought itself. It dances with meanings that touch the deepest places in the human soul, awakening memories of warmth and light that seem to come from somewhere beyond ordinary experience. And when ancient traditions speak of Uriel as the angel of fire, they are drawing upon this primal language to communicate truths that ordinary speech cannot contain. But the fire of Uriel is not the chaotic flame of earthly combustion. It is sacred fire, divine fire, the very essence of spiritual illumination made manifest in forms that human consciousness can perceive and receive. To understand Uriel as the angel of fire is to enter into one of the most profound mysteries of spiritual existence, the nature of divine love as both creative and transformative power. The earliest descriptions of the fiery nature of Uriel speak of him as the angel whose very presence radiates the warmth and light of divine love. When he appears to human consciousness, whether in vision or in the subtle movements of spiritual awareness, he brings with him the unmistakable sense of standing in the presence of sacred flame. This fire burns without consuming, illuminates without blinding, warms without overwhelming. It is the fire that burned in the bush before Moses, the flame that danced upon the heads of the apostles at Pentecost, the radiance that surrounds all true encounters with divine presence. Uriel carries this fire not as a tool or weapon, but as the very essence of his being. Ancient texts describe the fire of Uriel as having multiple aspects, each reflecting a different dimension of divine activity and creation. There is the fire of purification which burns away everything in the soul that is incompatible with divine love. This is not the harsh fire of punishment, but the gentle flame of healing which removes spiritual impurities with the same precision that earthly fire separates pure metal from dross. Then there is the fire of illumination, which reveals truth with sudden brilliance or gradual dawning. This fire lights up the dark corners of human understanding, dispelling the shadows of ignorance and confusion that prevent clear sight of spiritual reality. Under the influence of this fire, seekers find themselves suddenly understanding truths that had long remained hidden, seeing connections that transform their entire perspective on existence. The fire of inspiration burns through the ministry of Uriel as well, kindling the spark of divine creativity in human hearts. This is the flame that ignites prophetic vision, that moves poets to write of divine beauty, that inspires mystics to reach beyond the boundaries of ordinary consciousness. It is the fire that burns in the hearts of all who feel called to serve divine purposes in the world. Perhaps most mysteriously, there is the fire of transformation which has the power to change the very nature of what it touches. This fire does not destroy but transmutes, taking what is base and making it noble, taking what is broken and making it whole. Under the influence of this transformative fire, souls find themselves becoming more than they ever imagined possible. The tradition of Uriel as fire-bearer connects him to solar symbolism in ways that illuminate his role in spiritual development. He is associated with the sun not merely as a source of physical light and warmth, but as the celestial symbol of divine consciousness illuminating creation. Just as the sun makes physical sight possible, the fire of Uriel makes spiritual sight possible. The daily journey of the sun across the sky becomes, in this symbolic framework, an image of the journey of the soul toward divine illumination. The sun rises in darkness, struggles through the challenges of the day, and sets in the west, the traditional direction of Uriel, only to be reborn the next morning with renewed radiance. This cycle mirrors the spiritual process of death and rebirth, of purification and renewal that the fire of Uriel facilitates in human souls. But the solar connection of Uriel goes deeper than mere symbolism. Ancient traditions speak of him as the angel who governs the spiritual principles that the sun represents in the physical world. He is the celestial intelligence behind solar radiance, the angelic consciousness that directs the life-giving energy of the sun toward the fulfillment of divine purposes. This connection explains why Uriel is often depicted with symbols of the sun, rays of light emanating from his head, solar discs surrounding his form, flames that burn with the golden radiance of perfect daylight. These images attempt to capture something of his essential nature as a being of pure spiritual illumination. The fire that Uriel carries is also the fire of divine judgment. But this judgment must be understood in its deepest spiritual sense. It is not the arbitrary punishment of an angry deity, but the natural consequence of spiritual law, the way reality itself responds to truth and falsehood. The fire of Uriel reveals things as they truly are, stripping away all pretense and illusion to expose the spiritual reality that lies beneath surface appearances. Under the influence of this revealing fire, souls can no longer hide from the truth of their own condition. Every thought, every motive, every hidden desire stands exposed in the blazing light of divine awareness. But this exposure is not meant to condemn, but to liberate, not to shame, but to illuminate the path toward healing and transformation. The fire of Uriel also burns in the human heart as the flame of divine love awakened to consciousness. When souls touch the reality of divine love through prayer, meditation, or selfless service, they experience something of the fire of Uriel burning within their own being. This inner fire becomes the source of spiritual warmth and light that can illuminate not only their own path, but the paths of others as well. Mystical traditions speak of advanced souls as becoming transparent to the fire of Uriel, allowing the divine flame to burn through them without obstruction. These illuminated beings become channels for the same purifying, illuminating, inspiring, and transforming fire that Uriel himself embodies. They become, in effect, earthly extensions of his heavenly ministry. The fire that burns through the presence of Uriel is ultimately the fire of divine love itself. Love in its most active and dynamic form. It is love as creative power, love as healing force, love as illuminating wisdom, love as transforming grace. To encounter Uriel is to touch this fire directly, to feel the warmth of divine love burning away everything that separates the soul from its divine source. In the stillness of deep prayer, in the silence of contemplative awareness, in the moment the soul feels itself touched by something infinitely greater than ordinary human experience, there burns the gentle fire of the presence of Uriel. This is the flame that illuminates the path toward home, the blaze that continues burning, never ending, within the sacred space of the human heart. The brilliance that unveils the countenance of sacred love, glowing throughout all of creation. Uriel and the deluge. Water begins its rise gradually at the start, filtering through the bedrock of the world we know, pooling in areas where it has never pooled before. And then the deluge arrives. Not simply rainfall, but the unlocking of universal gates that hold back the waters, the unleashing of floods that have been restrained since the dawn of existence. This represents the great flooding remembered from ancient times, the sacred purification that redirected the spiritual trajectory of humanity's history. And within its unfolding, Uriel takes on a part that is both fearsome and filled with mercy. The account of the flood exists within the mythological traditions of societies spanning the globe. Yet it is within the Hebrew tradition and the writings that expanded upon it where we witness most vividly how this universal event functioned as a manifestation of sacred justice balanced with sacred compassion. The moral decay that had pervaded the earth following the uprising of the Watchers had grown to such magnitude that creation itself appeared at risk of abandoning its sacred purpose completely. Within this framework, the flood was not random retribution, but spiritual requirement, a method of maintaining the potential for redemption by eliminating the wellsprings of corruption that risked making such redemption unattainable. And Uriel, serving as the angel of sacred fire and purification, fulfilled a vital part in both the preparation and carrying out of this universal intervention. The Book of Enoch reveals to us that the four mighty archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, were the ones who presented the emergency of earthly corruption before the sacred throne. They had observed with increasing distress as the rebellion of the Watchers extended its reach throughout human civilization, bringing violence, deception, and spiritual turmoil into a world that had been fashioned for balance and tranquility. Each of the archangels received a particular assignment in the sacred response to this emergency. Gabriel received orders to alert Noah of the approaching flood, manifesting to him through dreams and visions that slowly unveiled the breadth of sacred intent. Raphael was assigned with restraining the leader of the fallen Watchers. Michael received the duty of containing the corrupted angels who had brought forbidden wisdom into human civilization. The role assigned to Uriel was potentially the most intricate and enigmatic of them all. He was given responsibility for supervising the spiritual aspects of the flood, guaranteeing that the sacred purpose of purification would be fulfilled while maintaining the possibility of restoration for those who stayed faithful to sacred will. Traditional accounts indicate that Uriel's participation in the flood commenced long before the initial raindrops started to descend. As the angel of sacred fire and wisdom, he participated in the meticulous preparation that would guarantee the flood accomplished its designated purpose of spiritual cleansing instead of simple destruction. The ancient writings speak of Uriel manifesting to Noah through a sequence of visions that assisted the virtuous patriarch in comprehending not merely what was approaching, but the reason behind its necessity. These were not the theatrical proclamations we might anticipate from writings about the end times, but tender, patient teachings that assisted Noah in perceiving the flood within its appropriate spiritual framework. Through the instruction Uriel provided, Noah gained understanding that the approaching deluge was not sacred anger released without control, but sacred love manifesting itself through the challenging work of spiritual operation. Just as a healer might require cutting away diseased tissue to maintain the vitality of the entire body, sacred providence was making ready to eliminate the sources of spiritual decay to maintain the potential for human redemption. The fire of Uriel fulfilled a vital part in this spiritual operation. Even as the physical waters climbed to purify the earth of its corruption, the angel's cleansing flame worked on more subtle dimensions to guarantee that the spiritual contamination brought by the fallen Watchers would not endure the flood. His fire consumed the invisible networks of corruption that had pervaded human awareness, burning away spiritual injuries and preparing the foundation for a new beginning. The tradition additionally speaks of the role Uriel played in safeguarding Noah and his family throughout the flood itself. While they remained physically protected inside the ark that sacred guidance had directed them to construct, they faced spiritual dangers that were potentially even more menacing than the climbing waters beyond. The psychic environment of a world undergoing sacred judgment would have been saturated with the despairing screams of those who were dying. The fury of the fallen angels who witnessed their corruption being cleansed away, the chaotic forces released by the collapse of universal order. Within this spiritual tempest, the presence of Uriel offered a sanctuary of sacred peace and safety. Traditional texts describe Uriel as forming a circle of sacred fire surrounding the ark, a spiritual boundary that shielded those inside from the psychic turbulence encircling them. This fire was not visible to physical perception, but burned intensely in the domain of spiritual sight, forming a zone of sacred order within the universal chaos of judgment and restoration. But potentially, the most significant role Uriel played during the flood was serving as a guide for the souls of those who died in the waters. The tradition indicates that even those who were physically destroyed in the flood received opportunities for spiritual learning and development through the ministry of Uriel. His fire revealed their spiritual state with complete clarity, assisting them in comprehending the outcomes of their decisions and preparing them for whatever form of existence waited for them beyond physical death. This dimension of the ministry of Uriel unveils the deep mercy that functioned even within the visible severity of sacred judgment. The flood was not simply retribution, but opportunity, a chance for souls to encounter sacred truth with extraordinary clarity and to make decisions regarding their spiritual future based on thorough understanding of what was at stake. As the waters started to withdraw and the Ark of Noah settled upon Mount Ararat, the role of Uriel transformed from protection during the emergency to guidance for the restoration that would follow. The earth that emerged from underneath the floodwaters was physically purified, but spiritually virgin ground, prepared for a new beginning in the relationship between heaven and earth. Tradition reveals to us that Uriel was essential in assisting Noah and his descendants in understanding how to exist in this restored world. The angel offered guidance on preserving the spiritual purity that the flood had established, on preventing the errors that had resulted in the earlier corruption, on constructing human civilization in ways that would respect rather than break sacred will. The rainbow that manifested as a sign of sacred covenant following the flood is occasionally linked with the continuing presence of Uriel in the restored world. Just as his fire had purified creation through the medium of water, now his light would function as a constant reminder of sacred faithfulness and the potential for redemption. Within the account of Uriel and the deluge, we witness the angel of sacred fire functioning as an instrument of both judgment and mercy, destruction and restoration. His participation in this universal event unveils the intricate nature of sacred love, a love so thorough that it will even turn to visible severity to maintain the potential for ultimate healing and restoration. The flood becomes, within this understanding, not the account of sacred anger, but the account of sacred surgery, performed with limitless skill and compassion to eliminate spiritual disease and restore the potential for health to creation. And Uriel stands at the heart of this account as the skilled surgeon of souls, using the instrument of sacred fire with complete precision and limitless love. Uriel in ancient mysticism. Within the concealed chambers of ancient temples, where incense burned continuously and scribes worked over texts that few would ever encounter, a different form of spiritual seeking was developing. This was the realm of Jewish mysticism, a domain of contemplative practice and visionary experience that would cultivate some of the most deep spiritual insights in the history of humanity. And within this realm of mystical seeking, Uriel arose as one of the most significant and cherished guides. The origins of Jewish mysticism extend back to the earliest biblical periods. Yet it was throughout the centuries that followed the destruction of the Second Temple that these contemplative traditions started to blossom with exceptional richness. Confronted with the loss of the central institution of their religious existence, Jewish seekers turned within, developing practices of prayer, meditation, and visionary experience that could offer direct encounter with sacred reality. Within this framework, angels assumed new importance as mediators between the limitless God and limited human consciousness. They became not merely messengers or servants, but teachers and guides who could direct sincere seekers into direct experience of sacred truth. Among these angelic teachers, Uriel occupied a unique place as the angel of sacred wisdom and illumination. The earliest mystical texts speak of Uriel as the angel who manifests to contemplatives in the profound stages of meditative practice, when ordinary consciousness has been quieted and the soul becomes open to more subtle forms of sacred communication. Unlike the theatrical manifestations recorded in writings about the end times, these mystical encounters with Uriel are characteristically tender and gradual, developing with the natural rhythm of deepening spiritual awareness. Contemplatives describe encountering Uriel in what they name the Palace of Flames, a spiritual domain that exists at the crossing point of human consciousness and sacred reality. This palace is not a physical location, but a state of awareness in which the soul becomes transparent to sacred fire, permitting the illuminating presence of Uriel to consume the veils that normally hide spiritual vision. Within these encounters, Uriel manifests not as an external being, but as the soul's own deepest wisdom awakened to sacred consciousness. He speaks without words, teaches without concepts, unveiling truth through direct transmission of understanding. His fire burns within the heart of the contemplative, igniting insights that transform not merely knowledge, but the very capacity for spiritual perception. The mystical tradition speaks of Uriel as the angel who governs the Sephira of Bina in the Kabbalistic tree of life, the sacred attribute of understanding or intuitive wisdom. Within this role, he functions as the channel through which sacred knowledge flows from its source, in the limitless, into forms that limited consciousness can receive and incorporate. This connection to Bina unveils the function of Uriel as the angel of contemplative understanding, the form of knowledge that arrives not through rational analysis, but through direct spiritual insight. He presides over those moments in contemplative practice when suddenly everything becomes transparent, when the patterns that connect all things are unveiled in flashes of illuminating fire. Traditional mystical texts describe particular practices linked with invoking the guidance and protection of Uriel. These include visualizations in which contemplatives envision themselves encircled by sacred fire, breathing exercises that ignite the flame of sacred love within the heart, and forms of prayer that call upon the assistance of Uriel in penetrating the mysteries of sacred truth. One especially beautiful tradition speaks of Uriel as the angel who teaches souls how to read the book of creation, the sacred scripture written in the very structure of reality itself. Under his guidance, contemplatives learn to perceive the hand of sacred artistry in every dimension of existence, from the dance of galaxies to the whisper of wind through leaves. This teaching extends far beyond intellectual understanding to encompass a form of mystical literacy that permits souls to perceive the sacred meaning embedded in all phenomena. Every encounter becomes a sacred text, every experience a verse in the eternal poem of sacred love. The fire of Uriel burns away the cataracts of spiritual blindness that prevent ordinary consciousness from perceiving this hidden scripture. The tradition additionally speaks of the role of Uriel in what mystics name the dark night of the soul, those periods in spiritual development when all familiar supports disappear and the seeker feels abandoned in spiritual darkness. Throughout these difficult passages, the presence of Uriel becomes especially significant, though it may be experienced more as absence than presence. Within these dark periods, the fire of Uriel burns so purely that it becomes invisible to ordinary spiritual perception, working changes in the depths of the soul that are only recognized looking back. Contemplatives learn to trust this hidden fire even when they cannot feel its warmth, understanding that the deepest purification often happens in visible silence and emptiness. Advanced practitioners speak of entering into what they name the chamber of Uriel, a state of consciousness in which the soul becomes completely transparent to sacred fire, no longer experiencing itself as separate from the illuminating flame that burns through all creation. Within this state, the contemplative becomes a living flame of sacred love, able to ignite the same fire in other hearts through the pure radiance of their presence. The mystical understanding of Uriel additionally encompasses his role as guardian of sacred time, those moments when the boundary between the ordinary and the eternal becomes thin enough to step through. He presides over the Sabbath as a weekly taste of eternity, over the high holy days as opportunities for deep spiritual restoration, over the daily periods of prayer as gateways into sacred presence. Within the rhythm of sacred time, the fire of Uriel burns with different intensities and qualities, offering contemplatives multiple opportunities to encounter sacred truth in forms appropriate to their level of spiritual development. His presence transforms ordinary time into kairos, time filled with sacred meaning and possibility. Perhaps most significantly, the mystical tradition presents Uriel as the angel of integration, the sacred intelligence who assists contemplatives in bringing their spiritual insights into practical expression in daily life. His fire not only illuminates truth, but offers the energy needed to embody that truth in concrete acts of love and service. This integration is viewed as the ultimate goal of mystical practice, not escape from the world, but transformation of the world through souls that have become transparent to sacred light. The guidance of Uriel guarantees that contemplative insight ripens into compassionate action, that the fire of sacred love ignited in the heart spreads to warm and illuminate the larger human community. Within the quiet hours when mystics withdraw from the noise of daily life to seek communion with sacred reality, within the moments when prayer deepens into wordless contemplation, within the experiences of sudden illumination that transform understanding forever, there burns the gentle fire of the presence of Uriel. He remains the faithful guide of all who seek to know God, not merely through concepts, but through direct experience of sacred love burning in the sanctuary of the awakened heart. Uriel and the Apocalypse. At the boundary of time, where the familiar world dissolves into the mystery of ultimate things, ancient seers caught glimpses of universal transformation that would reshape reality itself. These apocalyptic visions, born from centuries of suffering and hope, painted pictures of endings that were also beginnings, of judgment that was also redemption. And standing at the heart of these ultimate revelations, we find Uriel in one of his most deep and mysterious roles. The word apocalypse means unveiling, revelation, the drawing back of veils that normally conceal spiritual reality from ordinary sight. Within the literature of apocalyptic vision, Uriel manifests as the angel of ultimate disclosure, the sacred messenger who unveils the deepest patterns of universal purpose and sacred intention. Unlike his manifestations in other contexts where his fire burns gently and his wisdom unfolds gradually, the apocalyptic manifestations of Uriel carry the intensity of final revelation. Here he manifests as the angel who stands at the crossing point of time and eternity, translating sacred intentions that span universal ages into forms that human consciousness can receive and comprehend. The second book of Esdras, one of the most significant apocalyptic texts in the Jewish tradition, presents Uriel as the primary angelic interpreter of end-time visions. Within this role, he manifests to the prophet Ezra during a period of deep spiritual emergency when the destruction of Jerusalem and the exile of the Jewish people had shattered conventional understanding of sacred providence. The questions of Ezra are the questions that arise in every human heart when confronted with inexplicable suffering. If God is just, why do the righteous suffer while the wicked flourish? If God loves creation, why does evil appear to triumph so frequently? If sacred promises are trustworthy, why do they appear so long delayed in their fulfillment? The responses of Uriel to these anguished questions unveil a different dimension of his angelic ministry. Here he manifests not primarily as the gentle teacher of mystical contemplatives, but as the universal interpreter who can place human suffering within the vast context of sacred purpose, working itself out across ages. His apocalyptic teaching begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. Human beings, Uriel explains, naturally perceive reality from their limited viewpoint within time and space. But sacred purpose operates according to patterns that span universal cycles, weaving meanings that only become visible when viewed from the perspective of eternity. The angel uses vivid metaphors to assist Ezra in understanding this universal perspective. He speaks of the present age as a woman in labor, groaning with the pain of bringing forth something new. The suffering that appears so meaningless from a human perspective is unveiled as the birth pangs of a new creation, the necessary transition between what has been and what is yet to arrive. The apocalyptic fire of Uriel burns with particular intensity as he unveils visions of the end times. But these are not random scenes of destruction designed to terrify or punish. They are carefully orchestrated revelations of justice, moments when the hidden spiritual realities that have been operating throughout history finally become visible to all creation. Within these visions, Uriel manifests as the angel who measures and weighs, who separates and discerns with complete sacred accuracy. His fire unveils the true spiritual condition of every soul, burning away all pretense and self-deception to expose the choices that each being has made in response to sacred love. But even within these scenes of universal judgment, the essential nature of Uriel as the angel of wisdom and compassion shines through. The separation he oversees is not random punishment, but the natural outcome of spiritual law, the way reality itself responds to the fundamental choice between love and selfishness that every conscious being must make. The apocalyptic tradition additionally presents Uriel as the angel who oversees the resurrection of the dead, the universal moment when all souls are restored to conscious existence to face the ultimate revelation of sacred truth. Within this role, his fire functions as the instrument of restoration, rekindling the flame of consciousness in souls that have passed through the sleep of death. This resurrection is not simply the restoration of previous existence, but the revelation of each soul's true nature, purified of all the limitations and distortions that characterized earthly life. Under the guidance of Uriel, souls awaken to complete clarity about their own spiritual condition and the choices that have shaped their eternal destiny. Perhaps most mysteriously, Uriel manifests in apocalyptic literature as the angel who unveils the new creation that will emerge from the ashes of the old. His visions show not merely the end of the current universal order, but the beginning of something unprecedented, a reality in which the barrier between heaven and earth has been permanently removed. Within these revelations of ultimate restoration, the fire of Uriel takes on its most transformative qualities. This is the fire that not only purifies, but recreates, that burns away not merely corruption, but all the limitations that have prevented creation from fully expressing sacred beauty and love. The new heaven and new earth that Uriel unveils are not simply improved versions of current reality, but qualitatively different states of existence in which sacred love flows without obstruction through every dimension of creation. His apocalyptic visions offer glimpses of universal harmony, in which every being finds its perfect place in the vast symphony of sacred praise. Central to the apocalyptic ministry of Uriel is his role as the revealer of sacred timing. Throughout the literature of end-time visions, he manifests as the angel who understands the universal calendar, who knows the appointed seasons for sacred intervention in history. This knowledge of sacred timing permits Uriel to comfort those who wonder why sacred justice appears so long delayed. He unveils that sacred patience is not sacred indifference, but sacred wisdom, allowing maximum opportunity for repentance and spiritual growth before the final consummation of all things. The apocalyptic Uriel additionally functions as a bridge between present suffering and ultimate hope. His revelations transform current pain from meaningless tragedy into meaningful participation in universal transformation. He shows how every act of faith, every choice for love over fear, every moment of perseverance in the face of difficulty contributes to the great work of universal redemption. Within the quiet moments when believers feel overwhelmed by the visible triumph of evil in the world, when injustice appears to reign unchallenged, when sacred promises feel distant and uncertain, the apocalyptic fire of Uriel burns as a reminder that current appearances are not ultimate reality. His presence in apocalyptic literature assures seekers that sacred love has not abandoned creation, but is working through even the darkest circumstances to bring about the ultimate triumph of light over darkness, love over fear, truth over deception. The end, he unveils, is not destruction, but transformation, not punishment, but purification, not loss, but the finding of everything that has ever truly mattered. Within the great unveiling that stands at the end of time, Uriel manifests as the angel of ultimate revelation, the sacred flame that illuminates the final meaning of existence and unveils the perfect love that has been working through all things from the beginning to bring creation home to its sacred source. The lost canon. Sacred texts have always been collections of choices. Someone decided what belonged and what didn't. Within the early centuries of Christianity, church leaders gathered to make these decisions. They examined hundreds of writings. Some made it into the Bible. Others were set aside. The story of Uriel lived in those other books, the ones that didn't make the final cut. These writings told of his wisdom, his fire, his role in guiding souls, but they weren't chosen for the official collection. Why did this happen? The reasons are gentler than you might think. The early church wanted unity. They needed texts that all communities could accept, books that told clear, consistent accounts. Uriel manifested in writings that were complex. They spoke of multiple heavens, detailed angel hierarchies, and mystical visions. These ideas felt too intricate for everyday believers. Church fathers worried about confusion. If every community had different angel accounts, would the faith splinter? They chose simpler narratives. 4 archangels instead of 7. Clear roles instead of mysterious ones. Gabriel brought messages. Michael fought battles. Raphael brought healing. These were easy to understand. The fire of Uriel was harder to explain. His wisdom seemed too vast, too universal. His role in judgment felt overwhelming. So his accounts were gently moved aside, not destroyed, but not promoted either. They lived in the margins, in the whispered tales of mystics and scholars. The Book of Enoch, where Uriel shines brightest, faced this fate. Jewish communities treasured it for centuries. Early Christians quoted from it. But as the church organized, it became too exotic, too filled with strange cosmology and angel lore. It was labeled apocryphal, hidden, secret, not for everyone. This wasn't malice, it was caution. Church leaders wanted to protect people from confusion. They thought simple accounts were safer than complex ones. They feared that too much angel lore might distract from the central message of love and salvation. But books have their own life. The accounts of Uriel didn't vanish. They lived in monasteries, copied by careful hands. Scholars studied them in quiet libraries. Mystics meditated on them in hidden chambers. The angel of fire continued to burn, even if more softly. Different regions made different choices. Ethiopian Christians kept the Book of Enoch in their Bible. Eastern Orthodox traditions remembered Uriel in their prayers. Western Christianity was stricter, but even there his image manifested on cathedral walls and in illuminated manuscripts. The decision-makers were human. They did their best with incomplete information. They couldn't see the future, couldn't know how these choices would echo through centuries. They made decisions based on their time, their concerns, their understanding of what people needed. Sometimes, exclusion created allure. The hidden often becomes more fascinating than the revealed. The absence of Uriel from the main texts made his account more intriguing. Artists painted him. Poets wrote about him. Mystics sought his guidance. The forgotten angel found new life in imagination. The process wasn't sudden. Centuries passed as texts were sorted, discussed, debated. The status of Uriel shifted slowly. One generation treasured his accounts. The next questioned them. Another generation forgot them entirely. Then someone would rediscover an old manuscript and remember. Translation played a role too. As texts moved from Hebrew to Greek to Latin, some nuances disappeared. The complex nature of Uriel became harder to capture in new languages. His fire dimmed in translation. His wisdom seemed less clear when filtered through different words. Politics mattered as well. Different Christian communities had different favorites. Some loved mystical texts, others preferred practical ones. The winners wrote the final list. The losers saw their beloved books set aside. Uriel was caught in these gentle struggles. But truth has persistence. Even excluded accounts find ways to survive. They whisper through art, through poetry, through the dreams of believers. The fire of Uriel never truly went out. It just burned in different places, warmed different hearts, lit different paths. The scholars who made these choices weren't villains. They were trying to build something lasting. They wanted texts that would unite rather than divide. They couldn't know that their careful selections would leave some believers hungry for the accounts that were set aside. Modern discoveries have brought some of these texts back to light. Ancient manuscripts found in caves and buried libraries. Scholars can now read what was lost. They can trace how these decisions shaped religious thought. They can see both the wisdom and the loss in these old choices. Uriel stands as a symbol of this complex history. An angel honored for centuries, then gently forgotten, then slowly remembered again. His account shows how sacred traditions grow and change, how human choices shape sacred narratives, how the excluded can find new life in unexpected places. The canon was closed, but hearts remained open. And in those open hearts, the angel of fire continued to dwell, patient and eternal, waiting for his time to return to the light where he belonged. Uriel in Christian tradition. Christianity embraced Uriel slowly, quietly, like dawn creeping across a sleeping landscape. Even though his name didn't manifest in the accepted Bible, his presence lingered in the edges of Christian thought. Early believers had grown up with accounts of this fiery angel. They couldn't simply forget him when new rules were made. The first Christian centuries were times of blending. Old traditions met new teachings. Jewish angel lore mixed with Christian theology. Uriel found himself caught in this gentle transformation. He wasn't officially recognized, but he wasn't entirely forgotten either. Early Christian writers mentioned him carefully. They knew his accounts, but wrote about him with caution. Some called him the fourth archangel, standing alongside Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Others described him as a powerful spirit without using his name directly. They found ways to honor him while staying within acceptable bounds. Art told a different account. Christian artists painted Uriel on church walls and in sacred books. They showed him with his traditional symbols: fire, scrolls, the light of wisdom. Cathedral builders carved his image in stone. These weren't official endorsements, but they were acts of remembrance. The angel lived on in beauty, even when doctrine was uncertain. The Eastern Orthodox Church was more welcoming. They remembered Uriel in their prayers and liturgies. Icons showed him among the holy angels. Their tradition was older, closer to the original sources. They felt less pressure to exclude the angel of fire from their worship. In the West, things were more complicated. The Roman Church was stricter about which angels to honor. They worried about too much attention to heavenly beings. They wanted focus on Christ, not on elaborate angel hierarchies. Uriel became a whispered name, spoken in private devotions rather than public prayers. Monasteries became refuges for his memory. Monks copied ancient texts that told his accounts. They painted him in their illuminated manuscripts. They meditated on his role as guardian and teacher. Within these quiet places, far from theological debates, the flame of Uriel continued to burn. The Middle Ages brought new interest in angels. Christians faced plagues, wars, and uncertainty. They wanted heavenly protectors. Angel devotion grew stronger. The reputation of Uriel as a guardian made him attractive to worried believers. They asked for his protection even if their priests weren't sure they should. Mystery plays performed in town squares sometimes featured Uriel. Actors portrayed him as the angel who guarded the gate of Eden. Audiences loved these dramatic presentations. They brought Bible accounts to life in ways that sermons couldn't match. Through theater, Uriel reached people who might never read theological texts. Folk traditions preserved his memory differently. Country people told accounts about a fiery angel who helped during disasters. They said he warned of floods and protected crops from storms. These weren't official teachings, but they kept his name alive in rural communities. Simple faith often preserved what formal doctrine had set aside. The Reformation brought new complexities. Protestant reformers were even more cautious about angel veneration. They worried it took attention away from Christ. But they couldn't erase centuries of tradition entirely. Uriel manifested in their art and poetry, even if he was missing from their official prayers. Catholic mystical traditions embraced him more warmly. Saints and visionaries reported encounters with the angel of fire. They described his wisdom and his gentle power. These personal revelations weren't doctrine, but they influenced private devotions. Uriel lived in the hearts of believers who sought deeper spiritual experiences. Renaissance artists rediscovered his appeal. They painted him in scenes of the Annunciation standing with the other archangels. They showed him in depictions of sacred judgment carrying scrolls of wisdom. Art historians can trace his growing presence in religious paintings of this period. Beauty opened doors that theology had closed. Different regions developed their own relationships with Uriel. Spanish Christians honored him as a protector against plague. French believers saw him as a guardian of learning. English poets wrote about his role in paradise. Each culture found aspects of his character that spoke to their needs. Music carried his memory, too. Composers wrote hymns that mentioned his name. Choirs sang ancient songs that praised the fiery angel. These musical traditions preserved accounts that might otherwise have been lost. Melody succeeded where doctrine had failed. The printing press changed everything. Ancient texts became available to more readers. People could study the Book of Enoch and other writings that told the account of Uriel. Private reading allowed personal devotion to flourish beyond official oversight. The angel found new followers among educated believers. Modern Christianity has grown more accepting of the legacy of Uriel. Scholars study his history without controversy. Artists depict him freely. Even conservative traditions acknowledge his role in ancient texts. The angel who was once excluded has found quiet acceptance in contemporary faith. His account in Christian tradition shows how living faith adapts and grows. Official decisions matter, but they don't control everything. Hearts hold memories that outlast rules, and sometimes what was once set aside finds its way back home, carried by the persistent love of believers who never forgot. Uriel and the Garden of Eden. Eden lives in every human heart as a memory of perfection lost. That first garden where innocence bloomed eternal, where harmony was the only song creation knew. And when that paradise was broken by choice, by curiosity, by the simple human desire to know more than we were meant to know, Someone had to guard what remained. Tradition places Uriel at the eastern gate of Eden, standing with his flaming sword. Not Michael the warrior, not Gabriel the messenger, but Uriel, the angel of sacred fire and wisdom. The choice makes perfect sense when you consider what he was guarding. Not merely a place, but a state of being. Not merely trees and rivers, but the very possibility of return. The sword he carries isn't meant for violence. It's made of the same fire that burns within him, the flame that illuminates without destroying, that purifies without consuming. This sword turns every way, the ancient text reveals to us. It moves like thought itself, like the dance of sacred justice, blocking every path that leads backward to what was lost. Picture that scene in the gentle light of dawn, Adam and Eve walking away from everything they had known, their feet touching earth that suddenly felt foreign. Behind them, the angel of fire takes his post. His presence is both terrible and merciful. Terrible because return is now impossible. Merciful because some things must remain sacred, untouched by the consequences of choice. Uriel doesn't guard Eden out of anger. He stands there out of love. The garden must remain pure for the day when humanity might be ready to return, not as innocents who know nothing, but as souls who have learned everything and chosen love anyway. The angel keeps paradise safe for that distant possibility. Centuries pass like seasons in the sight of the angel. Civilizations rise and fall beyond the borders of Eden. Humans build cities, fight wars, discover arts and sciences. They create beauty and ugliness in equal measure. Through it all, Uriel watches. He sees the spark of divinity that still glows in human hearts, even after the fall. Some nights, travelers claim they've seen a distant glow in the desert, places where Eden might still stand. A soft light that doesn't flicker like fire, doesn't move like lamplight. It simply is, constant and eternal. Those who've glimpsed it say they felt homesick for a place they'd never been, sad for a loss they couldn't name. The vigil of the angel isn't lonely. Other heavenly beings visit him, bringing news from the world beyond the garden. They tell him of the righteousness of Noah, of the faith of Abraham, of the encounter of Moses with sacred fire on the mountain. Each account brings hope that humans might someday be ready for return. Uriel studies each visitor to his realm with gentle eyes. He sees the longing in their hearts, the unnamed hunger that drives them to seek what was lost. Some come close to understanding. Mystics and poets, children and dreamers, they sense something beyond the veil of ordinary existence. But understanding isn't enough. Eden requires transformation. The garden itself remains unchanged. Time touches everything except this one place. The trees still grow, heavy with fruit that knows no season. The rivers still flow clear and sweet. Animals that have forgotten fear still wander peacefully among flowers that never fade. Paradise waits, patient as the angel who guards it. Other traditions tell different accounts about this guardian. Some say he teaches those who seek wisdom, sharing secrets of creation with souls ready to receive them. Others claim he manifests to the dying, showing them glimpses of the peace that awaits beyond earthly suffering. All agree his presence brings both awe and comfort. The symbolism runs deeper than simple guardianship. Uriel at the Gate of Eden represents the threshold between innocence and experience. He stands at the boundary between what we were and what we might become. His flaming sword is the barrier we must cross within ourselves, the sacred fire that burns away everything false until only truth remains. Medieval mystics meditated on this image for hours. They saw in the vigil of Uriel their own spiritual journey. The return to Eden wasn't a physical place, but a state of consciousness. The sword of the angel wasn't an obstacle, but a tool for purification. The flame that seemed to bar the way was actually the light that showed the path home. Artists painted this scene with tender reverence. They showed Uriel not as a stern warrior, but as a compassionate guardian. His face reflects both strength and sorrow. He knows the pain of separation, understands the cost of the choice that led to exile. Yet he also holds hope for eventual reunion. The eastern gate faces the dawn. Every morning, light streams through that entrance, touching the golden wings of the angel. It's a daily reminder that darkness isn't permanent, that every end contains the seed of new beginning. Eden waits for the dawn when its children will be ready to return. Some theologians wondered why the other angels weren't chosen for this task. Gabriel might have delivered messages of hope to the exiled. Michael could have fought the forces that led to the fall. Raphael might have healed the wound that separation caused. But Uriel was perfect for this duty. He represents the sacred wisdom that knows when to forbid and when to welcome, when to separate and when to unite. His vigil continues today, in this moment as you hear these words. Somewhere beyond the maps we draw, beyond the cities we build, the angel of fire keeps watch over paradise. His flame burns steady and eternal, waiting for the day when wisdom and innocence will meet again, when choice and obedience will be one, when the eastern gate will finally swing open to welcome the children home. The angel of repentance. Deep in the human heart lives a voice that whispers when we've wandered too far from who we're meant to be. That voice carries the gentle fire of Uriel, the angel who guides souls back toward the light they thought they'd lost forever. He doesn't come with judgment or harsh words. He arrives with a patient flame of understanding, showing us the way home to ourselves. Repentance isn't about punishment, it's about return. The word itself means to turn around, to face a new direction. Uriel specializes in these gentle turnings. He manifests not to those who are perfect, but to those who know they're broken and want to be whole again. His fire doesn't destroy the sinner. It burns away everything that isn't truly them. Traditional texts describe him as the angel who brings sacred mercy to earth. When souls cry out in genuine sorrow for their mistakes, Uriel hears their call. He descends on wings of flame, carrying scrolls that contain not condemnation but guidance. His light illuminates the path between regret and renewal, between sorrow and transformation. The fire he brings is unlike earthly flame. It doesn't hurt as it burns. Instead, it warms the places in our hearts that have grown cold with disappointment and shame. It melts the barriers we've built around our true selves. Under his gentle heat, the soul remembers what it felt like to be innocent, to be hopeful, to believe in second chances. Medieval mystics wrote about encounters with this aspect of Uriel. They described feeling his presence during their darkest moments of self-doubt, when they had lost faith in their own goodness, when the weight of their failures seemed too heavy to bear. A warm light would fill their cells. Within that light, they found not answers, but better questions. Not excuses, but honest understanding. The angel of repentance works slowly, like dawn breaking over a sleeping city. He doesn't force sudden conversions or dramatic revelations. Instead, he plants seeds of awareness that grow gradually into full acceptance of what needs to change. His method is transformation through love, not fear. Children seem to understand this better than adults. They naturally turn toward forgiveness when they've made mistakes. They don't carry the heavy baggage of shame that adults collect over the years. Within their easy return to joy after sorrow, we see how the fire of Uriel is meant to work. Quick to burn, quick to warm, leaving no scars behind. Artistic traditions often show Uriel holding scales or scrolls. These aren't tools of judgment, but instruments of understanding. The scales don't weigh sins, but measure the sincerity of the heart that seeks to change. The scrolls contain not lists of rules, but maps for the journey back to grace. His role is teacher, not judge. The fire of repentance burns brightest in the moments we least expect it. A harsh word spoken in anger suddenly echoes back with new meaning. A small cruelty we thought no one noticed reveals itself as deeply seen. The lie we told so smoothly shows its true face. Within these moments of recognition, the light of Uriel shines through our own awareness. The angel understands the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. The fire of Uriel burns away shame while honoring the truth that guilt reveals. He helps souls separate their actions from their identity, their mistakes from their worth. Repentance, in his presence, becomes a form of worship, not the groveling kind that seeks to appease anger, but the grateful kind that recognizes love. When we truly see how far we've wandered and how patiently we've been awaited, the turning back becomes natural, like a child running toward open arms. Some traditions connect the role of Uriel as angel of repentance to his position at the gate of Eden. The same fire that prevents return to innocence can kindle the transformation that leads to something better. Not the innocence of those who have never chosen, but the deeper peace of those who have chosen wrongly and learned to choose again. The process he guides isn't always comfortable. Truth rarely is, especially truth about ourselves. But his presence makes the discomfort bearable. Like a skilled physician, he knows that some healing requires temporary pain. The fire that reveals our wounds is the same fire that will heal them. Modern souls often struggle with the concept of repentance. It sounds outdated, religious in ways that make contemporary minds uncomfortable. But strip away the formal language, and what remains is deeply human. The desire to make amends, the hope for fresh starts, the need to believe that we're more than the worst things we've done. Uriel offers a different model of change than the world usually provides. Not change through willpower or self-improvement, but change through surrender. Not fixing ourselves, but allowing ourselves to be transformed. His fire doesn't make us perfect. It makes us real. The angel of repentance reminds us that every ending contains a beginning. Every acknowledgement of failure opens the door to growth. Every genuine, "I'm sorry," clears space, for I'll try again. Within his patient flame, we learn that the path forward leads through honesty, not around it. His gift to humanity is the knowledge that transformation is always possible. No matter how far we've fallen, how deep we've wandered, how lost we've become, the fire of return burns eternal. All we need is the willingness to turn toward its light and let it show us the way home. Uriel in the Renaissance. The Renaissance dawned like spring after a long winter, bringing light to minds that had hungered for beauty and truth. Within this flowering of human creativity, forgotten angels stirred in ancient texts and emerged on canvas, in marble, in the soaring lines of poetry. Uriel, the angel of fire and wisdom, found his way back into the world through the hands of artists who saw in him everything their age celebrated. Florence buzzed with new ideas about heaven and earth. Scholars translated Greek texts that had been lost for centuries. They discovered Hebrew writings that told accounts their grandparents had never heard. Among these recovered treasures were detailed accounts of the wisdom of Uriel, his role in guiding prophets, his mastery over sacred knowledge. Renaissance minds, hungry for learning, embraced these universal narratives. Artists began including Uriel in their religious paintings with increasing boldness, no longer hidden in manuscript margins. He stepped forward into full view. Raphael painted him alongside the other archangels in scenes of sacred majesty. His red robes blazed with the fire of his nature. His youthful face combined strength with gentleness. Renaissance painters had rediscovered the beauty of the angelic realm. The printing press changed everything for the account of Uriel. Books that had existed in only a few monastery libraries suddenly reached thousands of readers. The Book of Enoch, with its detailed accounts of the teachings of Uriel, spread across Europe. Educated people could read for themselves about the angel who had shown Enoch the mysteries of heaven and earth. Humanist scholars were particularly drawn to the role of Uriel as teacher and guide. They saw in him a sacred patron of learning, an angel who valued wisdom above all else. Universities began invoking his name in prayers for understanding. Students sought his guidance before important examinations. The angel of fire became associated with the fire of intellectual passion. Poetry flourished in this period, and poets found rich material in the account of Uriel. They wrote about his conversations with Enoch, his guardianship of Eden, his role in bringing sacred messages to worthy souls. The Italian poet Tasso included him in epic verses about the universal battle between good and evil. English writers began weaving his name into their spiritual allegorize. Architecture told its own account of the Renaissance revival of Uriel. Cathedral builders, working on projects that spanned generations, began including his image in their stone carvings. His figure manifested on church facades, usually holding a book or scroll to represent his wisdom. These permanent installations declared his importance to anyone who had eyes to see. The Catholic Church watched these developments with mixed feelings. Officially, they maintained caution about excessive angel devotion, but they couldn't deny the beauty of the art being created or the genuine piety it inspired. Many bishops quietly allowed the image of Uriel in their churches, reasoning that anything that drew people closer to the sacred served a good purpose. Mystical traditions embraced Uriel with particular enthusiasm during this period. contemplatives and visionaries reported encounters with the angel of fire in their prayers and meditations. They described his presence as a warm light that illuminated the deepest questions of the soul. These personal revelations influenced private devotional practices across Europe. The Renaissance emphasis on individual experience opened new space for the influence of Uriel. Medieval Christianity had focused on communal worship and official doctrine. Renaissance spirituality celebrated personal encounters with the sacred. Within this climate, angels like Uriel could flourish as guides for individual souls seeking their own path to God. Music began to carry the presence of Uriel as well. Composers wrote masses and motets that included references to the four archangels, naming Uriel alongside his more familiar brothers. These musical works spread his reputation through courts and churches across the continent. Melody succeeded where theology sometimes failed, embedding his name in the hearts of listeners. The Protestant Reformation created new complexities for the growing influence of Uriel. The reformers from Protestant churches typically viewed complex angel hierarchies with skepticism, believing these elaborate structures pulled focus away from a Christ-centered approach to faith. Yet even these cautious voices couldn't fully resist the Renaissance era's deep fascination with celestial beings. Uriel made appearances in Protestant artistic works and written texts, though handled with more reservation compared to Catholic territories. The scientific breakthroughs happening during the Renaissance appeared to validate ancient writings describing Uriel's understanding of cosmic matters. Those charting the heavens discovered arrangements that echoed angelic descriptions found in writings such as Enoch. This angel, who had shared knowledge about celestial bodies and seasonal cycles, seemed remarkably prescient to those minds now exploring the natural order. Women held a unique position in keeping Uriel's memory alive and promoting devotion to him during these times. Female mystics and those experiencing visions frequently described especially powerful meetings with this angel of flame. Their spiritual documentation, while not always reaching wide audiences, shaped local practices of devotion. Female leaders of religious houses commissioned artistic representations of Uriel for the sacred spaces under their care. The Renaissance recovery of classical scholarship also shaped how Uriel's essential character was understood. Those studying these matters observed parallels between this angel of flame and ancient personalities such as Prometheus, that mythical figure who delivered divine understanding to humankind. This connection to classical tradition made Uriel feel less alien to educated Renaissance thinkers, appearing more like a recognizable figure dressed in unfamiliar garments. Commercial pathways introduced fresh perspectives to European comprehension of angelic beings. Those engaged in trade and diplomatic missions returned from Eastern territories carrying accounts of how various cultures venerated comparable heavenly entities. These exchanges across cultures deepened European understanding of angels, bringing additional layers to conventional narratives about figures such as Uriel. When the Renaissance period drew to a close, Uriel had established a position in European culture destined to persist for generations to come. Official theological recognition might have eluded him, yet he possessed something potentially more enduring, a permanent place within the artistic and literary consciousness of Western society. This angel of flame had successfully returned to the illumination where he rightfully belonged. Uriel's presence across different cultures. Angels pay no attention to the boundary lines that humans mark on their maps. These beings travel without restriction between cultures, assuming different names and taking various forms, yet carrying that same essential fire. The narrative of Uriel extends well beyond its roots in Jewish and Christian traditions, discovering places of honor in belief systems that might appear completely separate but actually share that same profound human yearning for divine direction and safeguarding. Within Islamic tradition, angels bear different designations, yet serve comparable functions. Though Uriel receives no direct mention in the Quran, Islamic understanding of angels includes entities whose responsibilities mirror his with remarkable precision. Israfil, that angel destined to sound the trumpet signaling Judgment Day, shares Uriel's association with divine flame and cosmic transformation. Certain scholars detect echoes of Uriel's instructional role in various Islamic angels who offer guidance to prophets and unveil concealed knowledge. The Sufi mystics within Islam cultivated especially profound connections with angelic guides. Their poetic works speak of blazing beings who manifest during meditative states, delivering wisdom to those souls pursuing union with the divine. These angels of illumination display remarkable resemblance to Uriel's function as instructor and guide. The fire they carry is that identical fire, not meant for destruction, but rather purification, not generating heat, but rather light. Eastern Orthodox Christianity maintained Uriel's memory with greater faithfulness than churches in the West. Within Russian and Greek traditions, he manifests in sacred images and liturgical ceremonies alongside the remaining archangels. Orthodox faithful direct prayers toward him seeking wisdom and divine protection. Their houses of worship present his image, accompanied by traditional symbols, scrolls, flames, volumes containing divine knowledge. Eastern Christianity preserved what Western theological thought had laid aside. Ethiopian Christianity went beyond this, retaining the Book of Enoch within their biblical canon. Ethiopian Christians continue reading Uriel's narratives as sacred writings. They pay him honor in their churches and invoke his intercession through their prayers. In Ethiopian tradition, he maintains his complete position within the archangelic family, not a forgotten relative, but rather a cherished brother. Celtic Christianity wove understanding of angels into their distinctive spiritual fabric. Irish and Scottish traditions describe blazing beings who stand guard over sacred locations and impart ancient wisdom. While they don't consistently employ Uriel's name, the characteristics match his nature with perfect accuracy. Celtic angels move along the edges between realms, carrying divine fire into earthly matters. Folk traditions throughout Europe preserved Uriel's memory through more subtle means. Rural communities shared stories about angels manifesting during catastrophes, providing warnings of floods or shielding crops from destructive storms. They didn't always possess the theological terminology, yet they recognized that fiery presence bringing both warning and reassurance. Village houses of worship displayed simple yet sincere images of flame-carrying angels. The Jewish mystical tradition known as Kabbalah positions Uriel within intricate cosmic structures. Within this framework, he embodies divine judgment softened by mercy, that fire which eliminates illusion to expose truth. Kabbalistic writings describe his function in the soul's progression toward enlightenment. He manifests at pivotal moments of spiritual metamorphosis, presenting the fire that burns without consuming. American folk magic absorbed Uriel through traditions that immigrants carried from their homelands. Pennsylvania Dutch, hex signs, occasionally incorporated symbols connected with this angel of flame. African American spiritual traditions, weaving together Christian and ancestral elements, honored blazing angels who protected communities and shepherded souls through challenging periods. Native American traditions, while possessing their own deep spirituality, occasionally discovered resonance with Uriel's character upon encountering Christian teachings. The concept of a fiery spirit delivering wisdom and protecting sacred locations aligned with indigenous understandings of spirit guardians and sacred flame. These similarities helped create bridges between different spiritual understandings. Asian Christian communities formed their own connections with angelic figures such as Uriel. Chinese and Korean Christians wove angel devotion into their cultural expressions of belief. Artistic works from these areas depict angels with Asian characteristics and regional artistic approaches, yet bearing those same universal symbols of flame and wisdom. Latin American Catholicism welcomed Uriel with distinctive warmth. Mexican and South American traditions honor him as a mighty intercessor and protector. Folk artistic traditions portray him using brilliant colors and local cultural characteristics. He manifests in household altars and community observances, creating connections between official church instruction and popular devotion. The Roma people, scattered throughout many nations, maintained their own angel traditions frequently, including figures resembling Uriel. These travelers between cultures functioned as living connections for spiritual concepts, distributing stories of fiery angels wherever their traveling groups paused. Their oral traditions maintained ancient wisdom through constantly evolving expressions. Modern global communication has generated fresh possibilities for cross-cultural appreciation of Uriel's universal resonance. Online communities exchange stories and artistic representations depicting this angel of flame from countless different cultural viewpoints. These digital assemblies demonstrate how identical spiritual requirements express themselves through wonderfully varied ways. Contemporary interfaith conversation frequently uncovers shared understanding in figures such as Uriel. Representatives from various traditions discover they honor comparable beings under varying names. These discussions reveal how angels function as connections between faiths, transmitting messages of universal love and wisdom transcending theological distinctions. New Age spirituality has developed its own worldwide interpretation of Uriel's function. Practitioners across the globe call upon him as a guide for personal transformation and spiritual development. While these contemporary approaches might diverge from ancient traditions, they perpetuate the pattern of cultures adapting angelic wisdom to their present needs. Art museums currently display Uriel's image as interpreted by artists from countless different cultures and historical periods. Those visiting can follow his journey across continents and through centuries, observing how each tradition discovered its own method to express that same essential truth about divine flame, wisdom, and guidance. The Internet era has enabled small communities with distinctive Uriel traditions to broadcast their stories globally. Isolated groups that might have faded into obscurity now add their perspectives to the worldwide understanding of this ancient angel. Every culture contributes fresh colors to the flame that has burned since the beginning of time. Throughout all these cultural expressions, the foundation of Uriel's message stays unchanged. Wisdom remains available to anyone who pursues it. Divine fire burns within every human heart. The light guiding us homeward transcends every boundary we establish. In acknowledging these truths, cultures separated by vast distances and countless years discover themselves joined in the radiance of that same eternal flame. Uriel within occultism. When the Renaissance transitioned into the Enlightenment, certain minds turned away from angels toward pure reason. Yet others traveled a different path, pursuing ancient wisdom in writings that mainstream religion had rejected. Within this shadowed realm of occult understanding, Uriel discovered a different kind of veneration, emerging as a central figure in magical traditions, honoring him not merely as messenger, but rather as instructor of concealed truths. The term occult simply signifies hidden. Those practitioners embracing this path held the conviction that the most profound spiritual truths had been obscured from common view. They discovered in Uriel's narrative everything they pursued, an angel revealing cosmic secrets to deserving seekers who commanded the transformative force of divine flame, who served as connection between heavenly wisdom and earthly comprehension. Medieval grimoires, those hand-copied volumes of magical instruction, started featuring Uriel prominently within their angelic hierarchies. These writings describe techniques for invoking his guidance regarding matters of wisdom and illumination. The ceremonies were intricate, filled with meticulous preparations and exact invocations. Practitioners maintained the belief that approaching such a powerful being demanded profound respect and appropriate protocol. The Hermetic tradition discovered particular affinity with Uriel's character. Hermeticists pursued understanding of the correspondences between earthly and heavenly domains, holding the belief that divine patterns repeated themselves at every level of existence. Uriel, given his role as revealer of cosmic mysteries, became their patron and guide. His fire represented the illumination arising from grasping these concealed connections. John Dee, that renowned Elizabethan mathematician and mystic, claimed to obtain communications from Uriel through his crystal scrying practices. These comprehensive records describe dialogues with the angel concerning the nature of reality, the structure of celestial realms, and the destiny of nations. Whether these encounters were supernatural or psychological in origin, they shaped European occultism for centuries afterward. The Golden Dawn, perhaps the most significant magical order of the modern period, positioned Uriel at the southern quarter of their ritual circle, connected with the element of earth and the power of divine judgment. Members studied complex ceremonies for invoking his presence and requesting his guidance. The order's instructors taught that Uriel could assist practitioners in developing their intuitive capabilities and accessing higher wisdom. Kabbalistic magic embraced Uriel as among the four great archangels positioned at the corners of creation. Within this tradition, he represented the divine quality of understanding, not simple knowledge, but rather the deeper comprehension arising from spiritual illumination. Practitioners meditated upon his Hebrew name, attempting to embody his qualities of wisdom and divine fire. Angelic magic developed complex systems for working with beings such as Uriel. These weren't efforts to command angels, but rather techniques for aligning human consciousness with angelic wisdom. Practitioners fashioned talismans bearing Uriel's symbols, conducted invocations at times connected with his influence, and requested his guidance through diverse forms of divination. The Rosicrucian tradition honored Uriel as a master of the secret fire, transforming base metals into gold, not in a literal sense, but spiritually. They taught that his flame could eliminate the impurities of ordinary consciousness, exposing the golden nature of the enlightened soul. Their writings described him as an instructor who manifested to worthy students at crucial moments in their spiritual development. Alchemy, that mystical art of transformation, discovered in Uriel a perfect symbol for the divine fire powering all change. Alchemical writings described various spiritual fires, yet the fire of Uriel was distinctive. It burned without destroying, purified without consuming. Medieval alchemists perceived in him the secret of their great work, the transformation of the soul from lead into gold. Ceremonial magicians created complex rituals for invoking Uriel's presence. These weren't casual prayers, but rather carefully structured ceremonies involving precise times, directions, colors, and incantations. Practitioners wore robes of red and gold, colors connected with his fiery character. They burned incenses of frankincense and cinnamon, fragrances believed to draw his attention. The Key of Solomon, among the most renowned grimoires in Western magical tradition, contains comprehensive instructions for calling upon Uriel. The writing describes him as especially responsive to those seeking wisdom and understanding. It provides specific prayers and offerings created to honor his nature and request his guidance regarding matters of divine knowledge. Modern chaos magic has adopted a different approach to working with Uriel. Rather than following ancient protocols with exactness, chaos magicians modify his symbolism to contemporary requirements. They might invoke him for assistance with computer programming, viewing his role as revealer of hidden patterns as ideally suited to understanding code and algorithms. Wiccan traditions frequently honor Uriel as one of the four elemental guardians, though different traditions connect him with different elements. Some link him to fire, others to earth. His role remains consistent. He brings wisdom, protection, and the illuminating fire of understanding to those calling upon him with genuine hearts. Tarot enthusiasts discover Uriel's energy reflected in various cards of the major arcana. Some perceive him in the Hermit, carrying his lantern of wisdom to illuminate the path for seekers. Others connect him to Judgment with its themes of spiritual awakening and divine calling. His influence manifests throughout the deck for those understanding how to perceive it. Crystal healers work with stones they consider to carry Uriel's energy. Carnelian and citron, with their warm golden hues, are thought to channel his fiery wisdom. Practitioners hold these stones during meditation, attempting to connect with his illuminating presence. Whether the power resides in the crystals or within the focused intention, many report profound experiences. Astrologers have linked Uriel to various celestial bodies and influences. Some connect him with the sun, perceiving him as the angel bringing divine light to earthly consciousness. Others link him to Jupiter, that planet of wisdom and teaching. These astrological correspondences assist practitioners in timing their workings for maximum effectiveness. Dreamworkers invoke Uriel's guidance for comprehending the hidden meanings within their nighttime visions. They hold the belief he can manifest in dreams as an instructor or guide, assisting dreamers in interpreting symbols and messages from their unconscious minds. Dream journals frequently record encounters with fiery beings offering wisdom and insight. Energy healers perceive Uriel as a master of spiritual fire capable of burning away blockages and illuminating areas requiring healing. They visualize his golden flame surrounding clients, dissolving negative patterns and revealing the path to wellness. His healing isn't gentle like Raphael's, but rather transformative, burning away what no longer serves. The Internet era has generated new communities of practitioners exchanging techniques for working with Uriel. Online forums pulse with discussions of successful invocations, meaningful dreams, and synchronicities appearing to carry his signature. These digital covens preserve the ancient traditions while adapting them to modern existence. Academic scholars of esotericism study these magical traditions with growing respect. They acknowledge that whether or not angels literally exist, the psychological and spiritual benefits of working with archetypal figures such as Uriel are genuine and measurable. The practices developing around him serve authentic human needs for meaning, guidance, and transformation. Modern practitioners frequently emphasize that working with Uriel isn't about obtaining supernatural powers, but rather about developing natural human capacities for wisdom and understanding. His fire doesn't arrive from outside, but awakens what already burns within. The magic resides not in commanding angels, but in aligning with the divine potential sleeping in every human heart. Contemporary occultism has shifted away from the elaborate ceremonial approaches of earlier centuries. Today's practitioners might simply light a candle and speak Uriel's name with sincere intention. The complexity resides not in the ritual, but in the inner work of becoming worthy of the wisdom he offers. Critics express concern that treating angels as magical allies reduces them to cosmic vending machines available to fulfill human desires on demand. Serious practitioners respond that genuine magical work with beings such as Uriel requires deep spiritual development and authentic service to the greater good. The angel's fire burns away selfish motivations, leaving only pure intention. The occult tradition has maintained Uriel's flame burning through centuries when mainstream religion forgot his name. Within their libraries and lodges, his stories survived. Within their rituals and meditations, his presence remained accessible. They preserved what others abandoned, sustained what others permitted to fade. Whether approached through ancient grimoires or modern magical systems, Uriel continues functioning as a bridge between human seeking and divine wisdom. His fire illuminates the hidden connections between all things, reveals the patterns underlying apparent chaos, and guides seekers toward the truth burning at the heart of existence. Uriel within modern literature. The printed word provided Uriel new wings to soar into minds that might never have encountered him in church or synagogue. Modern literature became his refuge, a space where he could speak without restriction, freed from the limitations of official doctrine. Authors discovered in this ancient angel a character abundant with possibility, mysterious enough to fascinate, powerful enough to inspire, human enough to touch hearts seeking meaning in an increasingly complicated world. Romantic poets of the 18th and 19th centuries found Uriel irresistible. They were attracted to his role as the angel of fire and wisdom, perceiving in him a perfect symbol for the creative flame burning within artists. William Blake, that visionary poet and painter, included angelic figures reminiscent of Uriel in his illuminated works. Blake's angels blazed with divine fire, while remaining intimately connected to human experience. Lord Byron's dramatic verses frequently featured beings caught between heaven and earth, much like Uriel in his various traditions. The angel's complex nature, simultaneously judge and teacher, destroyer and illuminator, appealed to romantic sensibilities, celebrating both beauty and darkness. These poets understood that true wisdom frequently arrives wrapped in flame. American transcendentalists embraced Uriel as a symbol of divine knowledge accessible to every seeking soul. Ralph Waldo Emerson composed a poem titled Uriel that stirred controversy in his time by suggesting that conventional religious thinking was excessively limited. Emerson's Uriel speaks truths that disturb the comfortable order of heaven itself, representing the poet's conviction that spiritual insight must constantly challenge established forms. Victorian spiritualists, captivated by communication with otherworldly beings, frequently reported contact with angels bearing Uriel's characteristics. While these seance transcripts might not qualify as great literature, they influenced popular fiction of that era. Ghost stories and supernatural romances started featuring angelic guides with fiery natures and mysterious wisdom. Fantasy literature discovered Uriel as the 20th century arrived, authors creating elaborate mythologies found in him a ready-made character with centuries of traditional associations. His role as guardian of Eden provided natural conflict and drama. His mastery of divine fire offered spectacular visual possibilities. His wisdom made him a perfect mentor for fictional heroes seeking enlightenment. C.S. Lewis, though he rarely employed Uriel by name, populated his Narnia chronicles with angelic beings whose characteristics echo the ancient traditions. His Aslan carries many of Uriel's qualities: the divine fire that both judges and redeems, the wisdom guiding through sacrifice, the guardianship of sacred spaces. Lewis understood how ancient archetypes could breathe new life into contemporary stories. Science fiction writers discovered unexpected uses for Uriel's imagery. Stories about artificial intelligence sometimes invoke the angel of wisdom as a symbol for the divine spark that might animate thinking machines. Space exploration narratives use his role as cosmic teacher to imagine encounters with alien intelligence. The fire illuminating earthly minds works equally well for minds among the stars. Contemporary fantasy has embraced Uriel with particular enthusiasm. Urban fantasy novels, set in modern cities, frequently feature him as a character struggling to adapt ancient purposes to contemporary challenges. These stories explore what it might signify for an angel of divine fire to operate in a world of electric lights and digital information. The conflicts write themselves. Horror literature uses Uriel's dual nature, beautiful and terrible, to create figures embodying both salvation and destruction. Stephen King and other masters of the genre understand that the most effective supernatural beings are those who could represent either blessing or curse. An angel with a flaming sword makes readers deliciously uncertain about his intentions. Religious fiction has reclaimed Uriel from the margins, featuring him prominently in novels about biblical times and spiritual warfare. These books explore his traditional roles while adding psychological depth and contemporary relevance. Authors imagine his inner life, his relationships with other angels, his feelings about the cosmic dramas in which he participates. Poetry continues, discovering rich material in Uriel's story. Contemporary poets use his imagery to explore themes of wisdom, transformation, and the price of knowledge. His fire becomes a metaphor for everything from romantic passion to political revolution. The angel guarding Eden's gate stands watch over whatever paradise modern poets fear losing. Young adult literature has discovered Uriel as a character speaking to teenage concerns about identity and purpose. Novels featuring angel protagonists frequently give him mentor roles, teaching young heroes about their own hidden nature and cosmic destiny. His combination of wisdom and fire appeals to readers navigating their own transformations. Literary criticism has begun taking these angelic appearances seriously. Scholars study how authors use figures such as Uriel to explore theological and philosophical questions that might seem too heavy for direct treatment. The angel becomes a lens through which writers can examine ultimate questions about good, evil, knowledge, and the nature of existence. Graphic novels and comic books have embraced Uriel's visual appeal. Artists love drawing his flaming sword and fiery wings. Writers appreciate his complex moral position. Not quite hero, not quite villain, but something more interesting than either. Comic book Uriel frequently struggles with cosmic duties conflicting with earthly compassion. Feminist authors have reimagined traditional angel hierarchies, sometimes presenting Uriel in ways challenging conventional gender assumptions. These reinterpretations explore how ancient symbols can carry new meanings while maintaining their essential power. The fire of wisdom burns equally bright regardless of the form it takes. Children's literature handles Uriel more carefully, emphasizing his protective and teaching aspects while downplaying the more terrifying elements of his traditional role. Picture books show him as a gentle guardian whose flame brings comfort rather than fear. These early introductions plant seeds that may flower into deeper spiritual seeking later in life. Literary translation has brought Uriel's story to new audiences worldwide. Ancient texts, like the Book of Enoch, are now available in countless languages, allowing readers everywhere to encounter his character in something approaching its original form. Each translation adds subtle new dimensions to his eternal story. Book clubs and reading groups frequently find themselves drawn into deep discussions when they encounter literature featuring Uriel. His character raises questions going beyond plot and characterization to touch on fundamental issues of meaning, purpose, and spiritual truth. He transforms casual readers into seekers, at least for the duration of their reading experience. The digital age has democratized access to both ancient texts about Uriel and contemporary fiction featuring him. Electronic books and online libraries make his stories available to anyone with internet access. This availability has sparked new creative works as readers encounter his character and feel inspired to add their own voices to his ongoing story. Through all these literary appearances, Uriel maintains his essential nature while adapting to new contexts and concerns. He remains the angel of fire and wisdom, the guardian of sacred spaces, the teacher illuminating hidden truths. Literature has given him a home where he can continue his ancient work of awakening human consciousness to its divine potential. Uriel within popular culture. Television screens and movie theaters became modern cathedrals where ancient angels discovered new congregations. Uriel stepped out of dusty manuscripts and into living rooms across the world. His fiery presence now measured in ratings and box office receipts. Popular culture transformed him from forgotten theological figure into recognizable character, though not always in ways his ancient admirers might recognize. The supernatural television boom of recent decades embraced angelic characters with enthusiasm. Shows like Supernatural and Lucifer featured Uriel as a recurring character, though frequently with contemporary twists on his traditional role. These portrayals emphasized his fire and judgment, while sometimes missing the gentler aspects of his wisdom and guidance. Television, Uriel became more warrior than teacher, more destroyer than illuminator. Comic book publishers discovered gold mines in angelic mythologies. DC Comics featured Uriel in their Hellblazer series, while Marvel incorporated angel-like beings with similar characteristics into their cosmic storylines. These graphic portrayals could show his flaming sword and celestial power with vivid visual impact that written descriptions couldn't match. Comic book art brought ancient visions to life in full color. Video games found Uriel particularly appealing as a character type. Role-playing games frequently include him as a powerful ally or formidable boss, complete with fire-based attacks and abilities related to wisdom and judgment. Players could interact with digital versions of the ancient angel, making choices determining whether he appeared as friend or foe. Gaming made theology interactive. Hollywood discovered that angels sold tickets, though the results weren't always theologically accurate. Movies like The Prophecy and Legion featured angels engaged in cosmic warfare with characters bearing Uriel's attributes, even when they used different names. These films emphasized spectacle over spirituality, but they introduced millions of viewers to the basic concept of archangels with distinct personalities and powers. Music videos began incorporating angelic imagery with artists, using Uriel's symbols of fire and wisdom to add depth to their visual storytelling. Hip-hop artists referenced archangels in their lyrics, while rock bands used flame-wreathed figures in their album artwork. The Angel of Fire found himself soundtracking human experiences he'd never dreamed of witnessing. Reality television took an unexpected interest in angelology through shows about paranormal investigation and spiritual healing. While these programs rarely mentioned Uriel by name, they popularized concepts about angelic intervention and divine guidance, aligning with his traditional roles. Cable television became an unlikely vehicle for ancient spiritual ideas. Social media created new spaces for Uriel's influence to spread. Instagram accounts shared artwork depicting him in various styles, from classical Renaissance paintings to modern digital art. Facebook groups dedicated to angel enthusiasts discussed his role in their personal spiritual practices. Twitter users shared inspirational quotes attributed to him, whether historically accurate or not. Merchandise capitalized on renewed interest in angelic figures. T-shirts, jewelry, and home decor items featured Uriel's image and symbols. New Age stores stocked angel cards and figurines bearing his likeness. The ancient angel became a brand, though one with deeper spiritual resonance than most commercial products could claim. Japanese anime and manga discovered Western angelology and created their own interpretations. Shows like Evangelion featured angels with characteristics reminiscent of Uriel, though filtered through distinctly Japanese aesthetic and narrative sensibilities. These cross-cultural interpretations created fascinating hybrid visions of angelic power and wisdom. Documentary filmmakers explored the historical development of angel beliefs, with Uriel featuring prominently in these educational programs. History Channel specials and PBS documentaries examined his role in various religious traditions, bringing scholarly research to popular audiences. Television became a classroom where ancient wisdom met contemporary curiosity. Podcast culture embraced discussions about angels and spirituality. Long-form conversations about Uriel's role in various traditions found dedicated audiences hungry for deeper understanding than television soundbites could provide. These audio programs allowed for nuanced exploration of complex theological and historical topics. Young adult novels featuring angel protagonists frequently included characters based on Uriel. These books reached teenage audiences who might never encounter him in religious contexts, introducing his story through romance and adventure rather than theology. Popular fiction became missionary work for ancient archetypes. Fashion designers drew inspiration from angelic imagery, creating clothing lines incorporating symbols associated with Uriel. High-end designers and street fashion alike embraced flame motifs and golden colors, reminiscent of his traditional depictions. Runway models became unlikely evangelists for angelic aesthetics. Internet memes found humor in angelic hierarchies, though often in ways that would horrify traditional believers. Uriel became the subject of jokes about celestial bureaucracy and divine customer service. While these treatments were irreverent, they demonstrated his cultural penetration beyond religious circles. Streaming services discovered audience appetite for supernatural content, commissioning shows and movies featuring angelic characters. Netflix originals and Amazon Prime productions brought new interpretations of Uriel to global audiences. The Angel of Fire found himself dubbed into countless languages, spreading his influence further than the medieval missionaries ever dreamed. Virtual reality experiences began incorporating angelic encounters, allowing users to meet digital versions of beings like Uriel. These immersive technologies offered unprecedented opportunities for experiential learning about spiritual traditions. Users could walk through virtual Eden or witness cosmic visions that previously existed only in text. Celebrity culture occasionally embraced angelic themes, with famous figures claiming guidance from beings like Uriel. Whether sincere spiritual conviction or publicity strategy, these endorsements brought his name to audiences following entertainment news more closely than religious developments. Children's programming handled angelic themes more carefully, emphasizing protection and guidance over judgment and fire. Animated shows featured angel-like characters with Uriel's gentle teaching aspects while avoiding his more intimidating traditional roles. These programs planted seeds that might grow into deeper spiritual seeking later in life. The phenomenon of angel investing in startup companies created unexpected linguistic connections to figures like Uriel. While these financial angels had nothing to do with celestial beings, the terminology created mental associations, influencing how popular culture thought about divine intervention in human affairs. Popular culture's treatment of Uriel reveals both opportunities and challenges for ancient spiritual traditions in modern contexts. While mass media exposure introduces his story to vast new audiences, it frequently simplifies or distorts complex theological concepts. The Angel of Fire burns bright in contemporary consciousness, even if not always in the ways his ancient chroniclers intended. Through all these popular manifestations, something essential about Uriel persists. Whether portrayed as cosmic warrior or wise teacher, destroyer or protector, he represents humanity's ongoing hunger for divine guidance and meaning. Popular culture may dress him in new clothes, but it cannot entirely obscure the eternal fire that has drawn human hearts to his story for thousands of years. The Eternal Watcher. Here at the conclusion of our journey through Uriel's long story, we discover ourselves where we started, in the presence of mystery. This angel, whose name signifies fire of God or light of God, has watched over human consciousness for millennia, manifesting when needed, withdrawing when forgotten, yet never truly absent from the deep places where souls seek meaning. Time moves differently for beings like Uriel. While civilizations rise and fall, while languages are born and die, while technologies transform human life beyond recognition. He remains constant. The same fire that illuminated Enoch's visions burns today in meditation halls and prayer closets. The same wisdom guiding ancient prophets whispers still to hearts ready to hear. His story reveals something profound about how spiritual truth survives across centuries, not through official channels alone, though those matter, not through institutional preservation, though that helps. Truth survives because it meets genuine human needs. People in every generation hunger for wisdom, seek guidance, long for connection with something greater than themselves. Uriel endures because he answers these eternal longings. We've traced his path from ancient Mesopotamian angel lore through Jewish apocalyptic literature, from early Christian art through medieval mysticism, from Renaissance painting through modern popular culture. In every era, he adapts to new circumstances while maintaining his essential nature. The fire changes form but never dies. His wisdom spoke to Second Temple Jews seeking understanding of cosmic mysteries. It comforted medieval Christians facing plague and war. It inspired Renaissance artists creating beauty from divine visions. It guides contemporary seekers navigating technological complexity and spiritual uncertainty. Each generation receives exactly the illumination it needs. The excluded books telling his story most fully, works like Enoch and other apocryphal texts, demonstrate how living traditions transcend official boundaries. While church councils debated which texts belonged in the biblical canon, believers preserved other writings in monastery, libraries, and private collections. Hearts held what institutions released. His role as guardian of Eden carries particular resonance for modern consciousness. We live in an age acutely aware of paradise lost, environmental destruction, social fragmentation, the erosion of meaning and community. Uriel's vigil at the garden's gate reminds us that some things remain sacred, protected, worth preserving for future renewal. The fire he represents isn't destructive, but transformative. In a world often divided between those who fear change and those who embrace it recklessly, Uriel offers a third way. His flame burns away what needs to go while preserving what deserves to remain. He teaches discrimination, the wisdom to know the difference. His appearance in popular culture, however simplified or distorted, testifies to humanity's persistent need for archetypal figures, embodying transcendent values. Even secular entertainment cannot entirely escape the pull of these ancient symbols. They satisfy hungers that material success and technological achievement cannot touch. The angel of repentance offers hope to generations burdened by collective and personal failures. His message echoes across centuries. Transformation is always possible. Wisdom awaits those who seek it. Divine fire burns in every human heart. These aren't outdated religious concepts, but living realities for anyone willing to acknowledge them. Mystical traditions everywhere recognize beings like Uriel because they address universal spiritual experiences. The names and forms may differ between cultures, but the underlying reality remains constant. Humans encounter divine wisdom, receive guidance from beyond ordinary consciousness, experience transformation through sacred fire. His teaching role becomes increasingly relevant as Uriel represents the discriminating intelligence that can sort truth from falsehood, essence from distraction, the eternal from the merely temporary. The occult traditions preserving his memory through centuries of official neglect demonstrate how spiritual truth finds ways to survive. Whether through ceremonial magic or simple personal devotion, whether in elaborate grimoires or quiet prayers, his influence continued. Hearts that seek will always find the light they need. Modern literary treatments of his character reveal how ancient archetypes speak to contemporary concerns. Writers discover in Uriel's story themes resonating with current struggles. The price of knowledge, the burden of wisdom, the challenge of bridging different worlds. Good literature makes the eternal present. His story ultimately transcends any single religious tradition or cultural expression. He belongs to the collective human imagination, to our shared bank of symbols for experiences transcending ordinary categories. Whether encountered in ancient texts or modern fiction, in formal worship or private meditation, he remains available to consciousness prepared to recognize him. The Eternal Watcher sees all our searching, all our stumbling, all our small victories and devastating failures. He witnesses the courage required for each soul's journey toward truth. His fire burns as compassion for the difficulty of human existence, and as encouragement for the divine potential sleeping within every heart. As you drift toward sleep, perhaps touched by the ancient stories we've shared, remember that the watchers are still watching. The teachers are still teaching. The fire that has burned since before time began still offers its light to anyone willing to turn toward its warmth. In the quiet spaces between waking and sleeping, between knowing and unknowing, between the human and the divine, Uriel's presence remains. Not as doctrine to be believed or theology to be defended, but as living reality available to every consciousness recognizing its own need for wisdom, guidance, and transformation. The angel of fire watches still, patient as eternity, bright as hope, warm as love itself. His story continues in every heart seeking the light, in every soul welcoming the flame, in every spirit recognizing the divine fire burning at the center of existence. He waits there now, in the place where all stories end and begin, ready to guide whoever is ready to be guided home.